They fired the shy maid on Christmas Eve. What the prince discovered later shocked everyone. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Clara kept her eyes on the floorboards, because looking up was dangerous in a house like this. The servants' hall was warm, but it did not feel warm. The long tables stood cleared, as if even crumbs might be judged. Candles burned with a careful steadiness. The clock sounded too loud. "Stand in order," the steward said. His voice carried like a bell. Herr Kruger did not raise it. He never needed to. The room obeyed him, as if obedience were the only hymn these walls knew. Clara folded her hands in front of her apron and stepped into her place among the maids. She was used to being a shape at the edge, a quiet pair of hands, a body that moved when called and vanished when not. Tonight, no one vanished. Baroness Adelheid sat at the head of the room. She wore her dignity like armor. Clara had never seen her without it. The Baroness looked down the line of servants and said, "It is Christmas Eve. I will have no disorder." No one answered. No one would. Herr Kruger cleared his throat. A sealed packet was to be sent to Vienna this afternoon. It did not leave this estate. A footman shifted his weight, then stilled when Adelheid's gaze flicked his way. Herr Kruger continued, "These are household documents, matters of correspondence and accounts, matters that do not concern servants, except in the carrying of them." Clara's stomach tightened, though she did not yet know why. Her mind went back to the corridor outside the study, the tray in her hands, the steward passing, his eyes on her as if he were measuring her. Adelheid's voice cut in, "And yet servants are the hands by which such matters move. If those hands cannot be trusted, the household cannot stand." Herr Kruger took a thin sheet of paper from his pocket. "I have asked and I have waited. I have given the guilty party an opportunity to come forward." No one moved. Clara felt her own breath become shallow, as if her chest were refusing to make noise. Herr Kruger's gaze landed on her. It was gentle. It was too gentle. "Clara," he said. Her name sounded wrong in his mouth. Too public. Too heavy. She lifted her head a little, not enough to meet his eyes fully. "Yes, sir?" "Step forward." A small pause. Every second stretched like thread pulled too tight. Clara's feet moved before her mind had finished asking what she had done. She stood in the open space near the table, near the Baroness. Adelheid looked at her as if she were an item placed for inspection. Herr Kruger said, "You were assigned to the corridor near His Highness's study this afternoon." Clara swallowed. "Yes, sir." You were seen leaving that corridor." "I was carrying linens to the guest rooms," she said quickly, and then hated herself for sounding like she was pleading. Adelheid raised one hand. "Slow down. Speak as a person with self-respect." Clara tried to draw in air. "Yes, my lady." Herr Kruger folded the paper, then unfolded it again, as though the motion itself were part of the performance. "You were also instructed earlier in the day to bring a small tray to the housekeeper's office." Clara nodded. "Tea, sir." "The tray passed by the study door," he said, "and the sealed packet which lay upon the desk is now missing." Clara stared at him. Missing. She heard a quiet murmur behind her. Not words, something worse. The sound of people deciding what they believed before they heard her speak. She turned toward Adelheid instinctively. The Baroness did not offer even the smallest sign of curiosity. Only certainty. "My lady," Clara said, forcing the words out, "I did not enter the study. I did not touch any papers." Adelheid's eyebrows rose as if Clara had committed a second offense by speaking at all. Herr Kruger's tone remained mild. "No one claims you entered, Clara. They claim you lingered." Clara's throat closed. She had lingered, but only because she had heard a cough from inside and thought perhaps someone needed assistance. She had stood there one moment with the tray balanced in her hands, and then the housekeeper had called her name from the other end of the corridor. If she explained it, it would sound like an excuse. If she did not, it would sound like guilt. Adelheid said, "Do not trouble yourself. We will not conduct a debate." Clara's fingers dug into each other. "My lady, I swear, we do not accept oaths from servants when facts are absent," Adelheid replied. Herr Kruger nodded. The packet contained documents bearing the princely seal. It was to be delivered to a notary in Vienna before the holiday. Clara's skin went cold under her clothes. The princely seal. She did not know the words those papers held, but she knew enough to understand that anything touched by that seal was treated as sacred. Adelheid leaned forward slightly. "Clara, you have served in this household for how long? 3 years, my lady. And in those 3 years, Adelheid said, you have spoken so little that one might mistake silence for virtue." A few servants lowered their heads further, as if to avoid being struck by the sentence. Adelheid continued, "Yet silence can also be a method of concealment. A timid creature can hide behind lowered lashes. It is a common trick." Clara felt heat rise into her face, sudden and humiliating. She opened her mouth, and nothing came. Words fled when she needed them most, as if even her voice had been trained to obey. Herr Kruger said, "If you know where the packet is, Clara, you may place it on the table. We will speak no further of it." Clara's lips parted. Her mind went blank with panic. She whispered, "I do not know." Adelheid's expression did not change. "Then we will speak further of it." Herr Kruger's eyes remained kind. "Perhaps you took it without understanding its importance. Perhaps you meant to return it. Perhaps you were curious." Clara shook her head quickly. "No, sir, I was not curious. I would never—" Adelheid's voice sharpened. "Enough. This household will not begin Christmas under suspicion. There are children in Vienna who go hungry because their betters are forced to waste time on servant dishonesty. I will not indulge it." Clara's chest tightened again, but this time with something like despair. "My lady," she said, and surprised herself by how steady the words were, "I did not take it. If something is missing, I can help search. Please, let me help." Adelheid regarded her as one might regard a cracked cup. "You will help," Adelheid said, "by removing yourself from this house." The sentence fell into the room like a stone dropped into a quiet pond. The ripples reached every face. No one moved. No one dared. Clara blinked. "My lady, I do not understand." Herr Kruger made a small sound of regret. "Baroness, perhaps we might—" Adelheid's gaze slid to him. He stopped. Adelheid turned back to Clara. "You are dismissed, immediately. You will pack what belongs to you and leave before midnight." Clara's ears rang. It did not seem possible. Dismissed on Christmas Eve. She tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick. "But, my lady, I have nowhere—" "Then you will find somewhere," Adelheid said, with calm finality. "This household cannot keep what it cannot trust." A younger maid behind Clara inhaled sharply, then covered it with a cough. Someone else shifted, then froze. Clara forced herself to look at Herr Kruger. "Sir, please, tell her—" Herr Kruger kept his eyes on the paper in his hands. "The Baroness has spoken." Clara's hands trembled. She drew them together, trying to stop the shaking. Adelheid added, as if delivering a second gift, "You will not be given a reference. You will not be given severance. You will not take the household's charity after this disgrace." Clara heard her own voice, small and awful. "Disgrace?" "Yes," Adelheid said. "Let it teach you something." Clara wanted to ask what lesson could be learned from being innocent and powerless. But the question stayed trapped in her throat because it would change nothing. Herr Kruger said, "You may go." Clara turned. Her legs felt unsteady, yet they carried her away. She did not run. Running would look guilty. She walked with the slow, obedient steps that had kept her safe for years. She passed faces she knew, the cook who once slipped her an extra roll when she had been ill, the footman who had once fetched her shawl without being asked. None of them met her eyes. Only the housekeeper, Frau Liese, stared at Clara with a hard pity that made Clara's stomach turn. Frau Liese leaned closer as Clara passed. Her voice was barely a breath. "Do not speak. It will make it worse." Clara nodded because nodding was what she did when someone told her something. She reached her narrow corner of the servants' wing and closed the thin door behind her. For a moment, she stood and listened. No footsteps, no pursuit. The house had already erased her. She opened her small trunk and stared at the few things inside. A spare dress, a worn book of prayers, a comb, a ribbon, a locket she never wore openly, hidden beneath cloth and fear. Her hands moved as if someone else controlled them. She folded, packed, tied her bundle with string. At last she sat on the edge of the cot and tried to understand what had happened. The packet, the seal, her name spoken aloud as if she were important enough to destroy. A knock sounded at the door. Clara flinched. "Yes?" Frau Lisa entered without waiting. The housekeeper's face was tight. "You will leave by the back way," Frau Lisa said. "The front steps are for guests." Clara's fingers tightened around her bundle. May I take a little bread for the road?" Frau Lisa's eyes flicked toward the hallway, as if the walls might report her. "If the Baroness knew I gave you anything, she would make an example of me." Clara nodded again. "Of course," Frau Lisa hesitated. Her voice lowered. "You should have come to me when you saw the packet." Clara looked up, startled. "I did not see it." Frau Lisa's mouth tightened. "Then you have offended someone powerful without knowing how." Clara's throat worked. "Why would they choose me?" Frau Lisa did not answer directly. She stepped closer and adjusted Clara's coat collar with brisk hands, as if fussing with fabric could hide compassion. "You are quiet," she said. "Quiet people are useful. Quiet people are also easy to blame." Clara felt tears come, sudden and shameful. She blinked them back. Frau Lisa's voice softened, almost against her will. "Go to Father Anselm. He will not turn you away." Clara whispered, "Thank you." Frau Lisa stiffened, as if gratitude were dangerous too. "Do not thank me. Go." Clara slipped into the corridor. The household moved around her as if she were already a ghost. Someone carried a tray of sweet cakes toward the dining room. Someone laughed softly at a private joke, then stopped when Clara passed. The back door opened with a protesting creak. Cold air rushed in, sharp and alive. Clara stepped outside. Snow covered the courtyard in a smooth blanket. The world looked clean. Clara felt anything but. She pulled her coat tighter and began to walk. The estate's windows glowed, candles behind glass, warmth behind stone. She had lit some of those candles. She had polished some of that glass. She had scrubbed floors until her knees ached, so the Baroness could walk without seeing dirt. Now she walked away with her bundle and her shame, and the house did not even watch her go. Her boots sank into the snow with each step. The cold crept through the soles. Her breath came out in pale clouds. She told herself not to cry. Crying would blur her eyes. Blurred eyes would make her stumble. Stumbling would make her look foolish. Looking foolish would make the humiliation worse. But tears came anyway, silent and stubborn. They froze at the edges of her lashes. She kept her head down and followed the road she knew led toward the chapel. Father Anselm had once spoken to her after a Sunday service, when she had come with the other servants. He had asked her name as if it mattered. He had said, "God sees you," and Clara had not known what to do with that sentence. Tonight, she needed to be seen by someone who would not turn her away. As she reached the small stone chapel, its door already closed for the night, she hesitated. The rectory stood beside it, a modest building with one lamp in the window. Clara went up the steps and raised her hand to knock. She paused. Her mind whispered, "You are dismissed. You are disgraced. You have no right to ask for help." Her stomach turned at the thought of turning back to the estate and begging. She could not do it. She could not stand before Adelheid again and be looked through as if she were nothing. Clara knocked. The door opened. Warm light spilled over her face. Father Anselm stood there, his hair slightly mussed, his expression startled to see her at this hour. "Clara?" The fact that he remembered her name broke something inside her. Her lips trembled. "Father, I am sorry to come so late." He looked at the snow dusting her shoulders and the bundle in her hands. His eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with concern. "Come in," he said at once. Clara stepped inside, nearly stumbling as warmth met her cold skin. She clutched her bundle closer as if it might be taken. Father Anselm closed the door and turned. "Sit. Your hands are shaking." "I am all right," she lied automatically. He lifted his brows. "That is not true, and you do not owe me an untruth." Clara swallowed hard. She stood uncertain. He pointed gently to a chair near the small stove. "Sit, child." Clara sat. Her knees wobbled. Father Anselm poured water from a kettle into a cup and placed it in her hands. "Drink." Clara obeyed. The warmth traveled down her throat and made her feel suddenly, unbearably tired. He waited until she had taken a few sips. "Now, tell me what has happened." Clara stared at the cup. "I was dismissed." His voice stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. "Dismissed? On Christmas Eve?" "Yes, Father." "By whom?" Clara hesitated. Speaking names felt dangerous. yet she had nowhere else to put the truth. "Baroness Adelheid," she whispered. Father Anselm exhaled slowly. "And why?" Clara's fingers tightened on the cup. "They said I took a packet from the prince's study." "And did you?" Clara's eyes burned. "No." He studied her face, not like Adelheid studied her, not like Kruger measured her. Father Anselm looked as if he were listening to something underneath her words. "I believe you," he said simply. Clara's throat tightened. She lowered her head quickly, ashamed of how much she needed that sentence. Father Anselm continued, "Did anyone ask you to explain?" "Yes," Clara said, and a bitter little laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It sounded wrong in her mouth. "They asked, but they did not want an answer." He nodded, as if he understood too well. "And where were you meant to go?" Clara hesitated. "I did not know. I only knew I could not stay." Father Anselm moved to a cabinet and brought out a loaf of bread and a small piece of cheese. He placed them on the table without ceremony. Clara's eyes widened. "Father, I cannot—" "You can," he said. She swallowed. "Thank you." He sat across from her, not looming, not making her feel small. "You may sleep here tonight. The guest room is plain, but it is warm." Clara's breath caught. "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," he replied. "You are a person in need." The words made her chest ache. She ate a little, slowly, because her stomach felt too tight for food. Each bite was both comfort and humiliation, because she had been thrown out like refuse and now a priest had to feed her. After a moment she murmured, "Father, do you think His Highness knows?" Father Anselm's gaze held hers. "The prince is away, is he not?" "Yes." "Then no," he said. "Not unless someone tells him." Clara stared down again. "Then perhaps it is better this way. He need not know about a foolish maid who was accused." Father Anselm's voice grew firm, though still gentle. "It is never better when injustice is hidden for the sake of comfort." Clara's mouth tightened. "It is easy to say that when one is not the one being cast out." Father Anselm did not scold her. He only nodded. "You are right. It is easier to say. Which is why we do not only say it. We shelter you, we listen, we keep you safe." Clara's hands trembled again. She set the cup down because she feared she might spill it. Father Anselm stood. "Rest now. We will speak more in the morning." Clara rose too, clutching her bundle. "Father, if I stay, will the Baroness come?" "She will not enter my home to make a scene," he said. "And if she sends someone, I will answer the door." Clara wanted to believe him. She did believe him, as much as she could believe anything at that moment. He led her down a short corridor and opened a small room. A bed, a clean blanket, a simple chair. Clara stood at the threshold, as if waiting to be told she did not deserve it. Father Anselm said, "You may lock the door if it comforts you." "Thank you," Clara whispered again. He paused, then asked, "Clara, do you have family?" Clara's fingers tightened around her bundle's string. "No, Father." He watched her carefully. "No one at all?" Clara felt the locket hidden inside the bundle, a small weight that had never been allowed to become a story. Her voice was very quiet. "No one who can be named." Father Anselm did not press. He only nodded once, as if accepting a wound he could not heal yet. "Sleep," he said. When he left, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They looked the same as they had yesterday. Hands that scrubbed and carried and served, yet everything had changed. She thought of Adelheid's eyes. Cold, sure. She thought of Kruger's voice, kind and sharp all at once. She thought of the other servants' faces turned away. Not cruel, just afraid. It would have hurt less if they had hated her. Fear was worse. Fear meant she was contagious. Fear meant she had become a warning. She lay down and pulled the blanket over her shoulders. Her tears came again, silent and steady, until exhaustion finally closed her eyes. Far away on the road leading to the estate, a carriage cut through the snow. Prince Matthias sat inside, one gloved hand resting on his knee, the other holding a folded letter he had read twice already. He had left Vienna in haste, having received news that his mother's health had turned suddenly uncertain, and that the household required his presence. The wheels rolled over the icy ground. The horse's breath rose in white plumes. Matthias stared out at the dark shape of the estate as it appeared between bare trees. Candlelight winked from windows like watchful eyes. When the carriage stopped, The front door opened quickly, as if the house had been holding its breath. A footman bowed. "Your Highness." Matthias stepped down, his boots crunching on snow. "Where is Frau Lisa?" The footman hesitated. "In the kitchens, Your Highness." "And Baroness Adelheid?" "In the drawing room, Your Highness. She will receive you." Matthias handed his coat to a waiting servant and walked inside. The air smelled of pine and candle wax. It should have felt comforting. Instead, something in the household felt tight, like a string pulled too far. The staff stood in careful positions. Too careful, too quiet. Matthias's eyes moved over faces he recognized. "Where is Clara?" A pause, small but noticeable. The footman's throat worked. "Clara, Your Highness?" "Yes," Matthias said. "The maid assigned near my study." The footman glanced toward the corridor, as if seeking permission from the walls. "She is no longer in service, Your Highness." Matthias stopped walking. "Explain." The footman's voice grew softer. "She left, Your Highness." "Left," Matthias repeated. His tone was even, but something behind it had gone still. "On Christmas Eve?" The footman nodded quickly. "Yes, Your Highness." Matthias held the man's gaze. "Did she leave willingly?" The footman swallowed. I could not say, Your Highness." Matthias did not raise his voice. That was not his habit. But the quiet that followed was worse than shouting. He walked toward his study without waiting for anyone to lead him. A maid stepped aside too quickly, nearly bumping into the wall. Matthias noted it, filed it away. Inside the study, the fire had burned low. The air smelled faintly of smoke, but not the clean smoke of wood. A sharper scent lingered, like singed paper. Matthias moved to the desk. The surface was tidy, too tidy. His pen set was aligned, the ink blotter placed perfectly, as if someone had tried to erase the fact that anything had ever happened here. He turned toward the hearth. Near the grate, something pale caught his eye. A scrap. Thick paper curled at the edges, half burned. Matthias crouched and reached for it with careful fingers. The scrap crumbled slightly, but held. He brought it closer to the firelight. A seal mark, partially intact. Formal script in black ink. The start of a name line. His jaw tightened. Behind him, a soft sound. A servant's foot shifting in the corridor. Someone standing just outside the door, listening. Matthias straightened slowly. The scrap held between his fingers like an accusation. He turned toward the doorway, his voice dangerously calm. "Who was here before me?" The corridor outside the study went silent. A footman stood there, stiff as a carved post. His eyes flicked from the prince's face to the scrap of paper in Matthias's hand, then down again as if looking could be counted as a crime. Matthias waited. The footman swallowed. "Your Highness, I do not know." Matthias's voice stayed even. "You do know who had charge of this room." The footman hesitated. It was a small hesitation, but Matthias had been raised to notice small things. "Herr Kruger," the footman said at last. "The steward." "Send him to me," Matthias replied. "Now." The footman bowed too quickly and hurried away. Matthias turned back to the hearth. The scrap was warm between his fingers. He held it closer to the lamp. A partial seal, a line of formal handwriting. Not enough to read fully, yet enough to know this was not a servant's note. He folded the scrap carefully and set it on his desk as if it were evidence in a court. A tap sounded at the door. "Herr Kruger," Matthias said without turning. The steward entered with measured steps. He bowed, the model of obedience. His face carried the sort of polite concern that never reached the eyes. "Your Highness," Kruger said, "we were not expecting you until after the holiday." "I was not expecting burned paper in my hearth," Matthias replied. Kruger's expression remained smooth. "Burned paper?" Matthias lifted the scrap. "This." Kruger leaned in just slightly, then drew back as if the paper smelled unpleasant. "That looks like a remnant of a draft. Perhaps the secretary—" "My household does not burn drafts in my fireplace," Matthias said. "Not without my instruction." Kruger's mouth tightened for a breath and relaxed again. "Of course, Your Highness. I will inquire. You will answer," Matthias said. "Who was in this room before I arrived?" Kruger took a slow breath. "The housekeeper tidied, Your Highness. She may have lit the fire." "The housekeeper burns documents with a seal?" Matthias asked. Kruger tilted his head, as if searching for the correct tone. I do not recognize that seal from here. Matthias's eyes narrowed slightly. Then come closer. Kruger stepped forward. His gaze touched the scrap for a heartbeat. Something passed across his face. A flicker. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition, quickly buried. Kruger said, "It resembles the estate seal, perhaps. That would not be unusual." "Unusual enough to hide," Matthias replied. "Why hide it?" Kruger's voice softened. "Your Highness, it is Christmas Eve. The household has had agitation. A small mishap. If there was confusion, we can resolve it quietly." "A mishap," Matthias echoed. "Is that what you call dismissing a maid tonight?" Kruger's eyes widened by a careful fraction. "You have heard about Clara." "I asked where she was," Matthias said. "I was told she left. I want the truth." Kruger's hands remained at his sides, disciplined. "Clara was dismissed for a breach of trust." "What breach?" Matthias demanded. Kruger's tone turned almost sympathetic. "A sealed packet went missing." Matthias felt the pieces shift, aligning too neatly. "A packet with a seal." Kruger nodded. "It was to go to Vienna, certain household documents. Clara was assigned near this corridor. She was seen near the study. She could not account for her movements." Matthias stared at him. "And you decided without my knowledge that she must be dismissed immediately." Kruger held Matthias's gaze. "Baroness Adelheid decided, Your Highness." "Then bring her," Matthias said. Kruger bowed. "As you wish." Minutes later, the Baroness entered as if she were entering a salon, not being summoned at night. Her posture was perfect. Her expression carried the calm of someone who had never been forced to explain herself. "Matthias," she said, "you travel on Christmas Eve. Your devotion to duty remains impressive." Matthias did not return the courtesy. "You dismissed a maid tonight." Adelheid's eyes did not blink. "Yes." "Without informing me," Matthias said. "I managed the household in your absence," she replied. "That has never been a point of confusion between us." "It is now," Matthias said. Adelheid's mouth tightened. "A packet went missing. We could not begin Christmas with uncertainty. I acted." Matthias held up the scrap. "And this?" Adelheid looked at it with mild interest, as if it were a stain on upholstery. "What am I meant to see?" "A seal," Matthias said. "A document burned in my own hearth." Adelheid's voice stayed calm. "If paper was burned, it was likely rubbish. Drafts, notes. The household disposes of many things." "Not sealed paper," Matthias said. Adelheid's gaze sharpened. "You are overreacting to a servant's failure." Matthias's jaw clenched. "Clara did not fail. She was accused." Adelheid lifted her chin. "Accused with reason." Kruger stepped in as if to soothe both sides. "Your Highness, the matter is unpleasant, but it has been handled." Matthias turned on him. "Handled for whom?" Kruger's smile thinned. "For the household." Matthias's voice dropped. "For your convenience." Adelheid's eyes flashed. "You speak as if I am your enemy." "You speak as if my household is your possession," Matthias replied. Adelheid's voice cooled further. "Your household is your legacy, and legacy requires discipline." Clara's behavior threatened order. Matthias's gaze stayed fixed. "What behavior?" Adelheid said, "She was the last near the corridor. She could not offer a clear explanation. She is timid, secretive, and prone to confusion. Such a person is a danger around important documents." Matthias almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Timid, secretive, or simply quiet?" Adelheid's tone turned sharper. "Quietness can be a mask." Matthias leaned forward slightly, the scrap still in his hand. "And cruelty can be one too." For the first time, Adelheid's composure cracked. "Cruelty? You threw a maid into the night on Christmas Eve," Matthias said. "No reference, no pay, no shelter." Adelheid answered without softness. "Consequences teach what kindness cannot." Matthias held her gaze. "Where did she go?" Adelheid's face smoothed again. "That is no longer our concern." Matthias straightened. "It is my concern." Kruger said, "Your Highness, you cannot involve yourself in every servant matter." Matthias turned toward him slowly. "Cannot?" Kruger bowed his head slightly. "It is not fitting." Matthias's voice became very quiet. "It is fitting that my name not be used to justify injustice." Adelheide's eyes narrowed. "Now you sound like a reformer." Matthias tucked the scrap into his pocket. "And you sound like someone with something to hide." Adelheide's hand tightened on the edge of her shawl. "Be careful." Matthias met her warning with stillness. "Bring me the ledger for outgoing correspondence, the one with today's entries, and the record of sealed packets." Kruger's smile faltered. "The household records are in order." "Then you will have no difficulty bringing them," Matthias replied. Adelheide's voice cut in. "This is absurd. It is Christmas Eve. You will interrogate ink and paper while the household waits for your presence?" Matthias did not look away. "The household can wait." Clara could not. Adelheide's cheeks colored faintly. "You are letting guilt cloud your judgment," Matthias said. "I am letting responsibility sharpen it." He stepped past them toward the door. Adelheid called after him, "Matthias, if you chase every servant's complaint, you will invite disorder." He paused at the threshold. "If I ignore them, I become the disorder." He left them standing, the air behind him stiff with offended rank. He did not go to the dining room. He did not go to greet guests or accept holiday compliments. He went where a servant's life would leave traces. The servant's wing smelled of soap and steam and careful silence. Men and women stopped working when he passed, not because he ordered them to, but because a prince in that corridor was not supposed to exist. Matthias stopped near a cluster of maids and said, "Who is the housekeeper?" Frau Lisa stepped forward with rigid posture. "Your Highness." Her eyes were steady, but her hands looked tight as if she were holding something in. Matthias asked, "Where is Clara's room?" Frau Lisa's throat moved. It was down the hall, Your Highness." "Take me," Matthias said. She obeyed. Clara's narrow space looked stripped, not simply cleaned, erased, her cot bare, her small trunk gone. Even the little hook where she hung her apron was empty. Matthias stared at the emptiness and felt a sudden anger that surprised him with its clarity. Not rage, not noise. A cold indignation that made his shoulders go still. Frau Lisa spoke quickly, as if trying to fill silence before it grew teeth. "We have rules, Your Highness. When a servant is dismissed, her belongings are removed at once." "At once," Matthias repeated, as if the household feared she might return. Frau Lisa's gaze dropped. "My lady likes order." Matthias turned back toward her. "Tell me what happened." Frau Lisa's mouth tightened. "Your Highness, I cannot speak against the Baroness." Matthias's voice stayed controlled. "You can speak the truth." Frau Lisa looked up, and for a heartbeat her expression was not that of an officer managing a household. It was the expression of a woman trying to survive it. "The steward said a sealed packet was missing," she said. "They called the staff. They named Clara. She denied it." "And?" Matthias asked. Frau Lisa hesitated. "The Baroness dismissed her." "Why so quickly?" Matthias pressed. Frau Lisa's eyes flicked down the hall. "Because my lady does not tolerate uncertainty." Matthias did not accept the answer. "That is a phrase, not a reason." Frau Lisa swallowed. "Your Highness, there are matters above me." Matthias's gaze sharpened. "Is there anything below you that matters?" Frau Lisa's lips parted, then closed. She seemed to choose her words like someone stepping around broken glass. "Clara is quiet," she said. "Quiet people make convenient targets." Matthias held her gaze. "Where did she go?" Frau Lisa's voice lowered. "I told her to go to Father Anselm." Matthias nodded once, as if that was the first clean piece of air he had breathed all night. "Good." Frau Lisa's face tightened. "Your Highness, please, if you involve yourself, they will blame someone else next." Matthias's voice turned firm. "Then I will make it difficult for them to do so." He left the servants' wing and returned to the main corridor. Kruger was waiting, ledger in hand, smile restored. "Your Highness," Kruger said, offering it. As requested. Matthias took the ledger, but did not open it yet. "Who decided Clara was the last near the study?" Kruger's tone remained mild. "Several people saw her." "Names," Matthias said. Kruger's eyes moved. "The footman, the junior maid. Frau Lisa, perhaps." Matthias looked at him. "Frau Lisa was in the kitchens most of the afternoon." Kruger's smile held, but his eyes hardened slightly. "The household moves, Your Highness," Matthias said. "So does a lie." Kruger's jaw tightened by a fraction. "Your Highness, you insult me." Matthias opened the ledger, scanned a few entries, and then closed it again. "The packet was to go to Vienna," he said. "Which courier?" Kruger answered smoothly. "The usual man, Herr Vogel. Bring him to me," Matthias said. Kruger paused. "He has already left." Matthias's gaze stayed on Kruger. "Without the packet." Kruger bowed slightly. "It was discovered missing too late," Matthias said. "Then the packet did not go missing at the gate. It went missing inside." Kruger's voice softened. "We will find it." Matthias stepped closer. "Will you?" Kruger held his gaze. "Your Highness, you are weary. You have traveled. I suggest you rest. In the morning—" "I will not sleep while someone in my house burns papers and throws servants into the snow," Matthias replied. Adelheide's voice came from behind, sharp as a cut. "Then you will ruin Christmas for everyone." Matthias turned to her. "If Christmas depends on pretending wrongdoing did not occur, then it deserves to be ruined." Adelheid stared at him. "You think yourself noble," Matthias answered. "I think myself accountable." He moved away, already reaching for his coat. Kruger's voice followed him. "Your Highness, it is late. The roads—" Matthias did not slow. "I am not made of glass." Outside, the cold bit his face, immediate and unforgiving. A groom hurried to ready a horse, eyes wide with alarm at being asked for such a thing at this hour. Matthias swung into the saddle and rode toward the chapel road without escort. He did not know what he would say to Clara. He only knew he had to see her with his own eyes, to hear her voice outside of Adelheide's mouth and Kruger's courteous poison. At the rectory, one lamp burned. Matthias dismounted and knocked. The door opened and Father Anselm looked out, surprised, then wary as he recognized the visitor. "Your Highness," Father Anselm said, bowing. "Father," Matthias replied. "Forgive the hour." The priest did not step aside immediately. "Is there trouble?" Matthias held the man's gaze. "A maid from my estate is here." Father Anselm's expression changed, protective. "Clara." "Yes," Matthias said. "I need to speak with her." Father Anselm studied him for a moment. "She is exhausted and shaken." Matthias nodded once. "I am the reason she is shaken, even if I did not order it." Father Anselm's brows lifted slightly at that honesty. He stepped back. "Then come in." Matthias entered. Warmth wrapped around him, simple and clean. The rectory did not have the polished shine of the estate. It had something else, quiet without fear. Father Anselm said, "Wait here, I will ask if she can receive you." Matthias nodded, hands clasped behind his back, posture controlled in a room that did not care about posture. While the priest went down the hall, Matthias stared at a small table with a loaf of bread on it. He thought of the estate table, cleared so thoroughly it looked afraid of crumbs. Footsteps returned. Father Anselm stood in the doorway. "She will see you." Matthias followed. Clara stood near the bed, fully dressed as if she feared sleep might trap her. Her coat was buttoned. Her hair was neatly pinned, but not as neatly as it would have been in service. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and the sight of them struck Matthias like accusation and grief in one. She curtsied quickly. Too quickly, not graceful, terrified. "Your Highness," she whispered. Matthias stopped a few steps away. He did not want to loom. "You need not curtsy here," he said. Clara's hands twisted together. "It is habit, sir." Matthias looked at Father Anselm. "May we speak privately?" Father Anselm's voice was calm. "I will be in the next room. If she calls, I will return." Clara's gaze flicked to the priest, as if the idea of being alone with the prince made her chest tighten. Father Anselm did not press her. He only looked at her with quiet encouragement and left, closing the door but not latching it, as if to promise he had not abandoned her. Silence settled. Clara stared at the floorboards again. Matthias spoke gently. "Look at me, Clara." Her shoulders tensed. Slowly she lifted her eyes. She did not meet his fully at first. Then she forced herself to. Matthias saw fear there. Not the dramatic kind, the practiced kind. "I returned tonight," he said, "and learned you were dismissed." Clara's lips pressed together. "I did not authorize it," Matthias continued. I did not even know. Clara's voice was thin. Your knowledge was never required, sir. The words were quiet, but they landed hard. Matthias inhaled slowly. You are right, and that is my failure. Clara blinked. Her expression did not soften. It did not harden either. It stayed guarded. Matthias said, They accused you of taking a sealed packet. Clara's hands tightened. Yes. Did you take it? He asked. No, she answered instantly, as if the word had been waiting all night for someone worth speaking to. Matthias nodded. I believe you. Clara's throat moved, and for a second her composure wavered. She looked away quickly, ashamed of how close tears were. Matthias said, I came to offer you your position back, with proper wages, and an apology from the household. Clara's gaze snapped up. An apology? Yes, Matthias said. And if you wish, I will ensure Baroness Adelheid does not speak to you again without my presence. Clara's breath came out in a small, bitter exhale. You would ensure it. Matthias accepted the sting. I would. Clara's voice trembled. And if she dismisses me again when you are away? She will not, Matthias said. Clara shook her head slowly. Sir, you do not know what it is to be a servant in a house where people decide you are guilty before you open your mouth. Matthias held still. Then tell me. Clara looked at him startled, as if she had never heard a man of his rank ask for her account without already holding the ending. She tried to speak. Her voice caught. She swallowed. They called us together, she said. They said the packet was missing. They said I was near the study. I said I did not take it. They said my silence was suspicious. My lady said I was dismissed. Matthias's hands tightened behind his back. And no one defended you? Clara gave a small shake of her head. They were afraid. Matthias's voice softened. And you? Clara's lips parted, then pressed together. I was embarrassed. Matthias frowned slightly. Embarrassed? Clara's eyes glistened. To beg, to speak too much, to make a scene, to be seen. Matthias felt something in his chest shift, a quiet shame of his own. He said, You were seen anyway, in the worst way, and I am sorry. Clara's fingers twisted harder. Sorry does not warm the road. Matthias let the silence sit because she was right. I cannot change that you walked in the cold, he said, but I can change what happens now. Clara lifted her chin slightly. What happens now is that I do not return. Matthias's gaze sharpened. Clara! She held up one hand, immediately lowering it again, as if she feared the gesture itself was improper. Forgive me, I should not interrupt. But I cannot. Matthias stepped a fraction closer, then stopped, reading her fear. Tell me why, he said. Clara's voice was quiet, firm in a way that surprised even her. Because if I return, it will mean they were allowed to do it, and they will do it again. Not only to me. Matthias stared at her. You think they chose you deliberately? Clara's mouth tightened. I do not know, but it felt prepared. Matthias nodded slowly. I found burned paper in my hearth. Clara's eyes widened. Burned paper. A document scrap, Matthias said, with a seal. Clara's hands trembled. I never touched anything in your study, sir. I know, Matthias replied. Clara swallowed. Then why are they saying... Matthias cut in gently. Because they needed someone. Clara's breath caught. The idea seemed to settle over her like a cloak she did not want, but could not deny. Matthias said, Come back to the estate tonight. If not as a servant, then as my guest, until this is settled. Clara's eyes flicked up in alarm. As your guest? Matthias's tone was steady. You would be safe. Clara shook her head quickly. No, that would be worse. They would speak. They would turn it into something ugly. They already speak, Matthias said. Clara's voice rose slightly. Then she forced it back down. They speak about servants because servants have no defense. If they speak about me near you, it will not be pity. It will be poison. Matthias studied her, hearing not hysteria, but a clear understanding of the world that he had never been forced to learn. He said, Then what do you want? Clara blinked, caught off guard. No one asked servants what they wanted. They asked what they had done. I want to be left alone, she said carefully, to find work where my name does not taste like accusation. Matthias's jaw tightened. You will not find easy work on Christmas. Clara's lips pressed together. I will find something. I have hands. Matthias looked at her hands then. They were red at the knuckles, chapped, honest. He felt anger again, not loud, not violent. A sharp, clean anger at the ease with which power could cut a life loose. He said, If you refuse to return, at least allow me to provide you with wages owed. Clara's eyes flickered. Pride and need fought each other in her face. I was dismissed without wages, she whispered. I will correct that, Matthias said. Clara's voice hardened a little. And when the Baroness asks why you gave money to a dismissed maid? Matthias answered simply, I will tell her I did. Clara stared at him, uncertain. She seemed to search his face for mockery and find none. Matthias said, Father Anselm told me you have no family. Clara flinched slightly at the mention, then steadied herself. No one who can help me. Matthias nodded. Then I will not leave you without help. Clara's eyes shone with held-back tears, but her voice stayed firm. It is easy to be generous when you feel guilty. Matthias did not deny it. Yes. Clara blinked. That blunt agreement unsettled her. Matthias continued, But guilt is not the only thing I feel. Clara's breath caught. Shall your Highness... He stopped himself before he said too much. He had no right to pile feelings on a woman who had been thrown into the snow hours ago. He shifted instead to what he could offer honestly. I will investigate. I will find the packet. I will find who burned that paper. I will clear your name. Clara's shoulders sagged slightly, exhaustion breaking through pride. Clear my name, she repeated, as if tasting the idea. Yes, Matthias said. And if you cannot? She asked quietly. Matthias met her gaze. Then I will still ensure you are not punished for a thing you did not do. Clara's lips trembled. She looked away quickly. For a moment, Matthias thought she would refuse everything. Then she whispered, almost against her will, They will not like this. I am not asking them to like it, Matthias replied. Clara's voice was very soft. You say that now. Matthias's eyes narrowed slightly. You doubt me. Clara lifted her gaze again, and there was no insult in it, only honesty. I do not know you, sir, not truly. I have seen you pass, heard you speak to guests. I have never seen you speak to me until tonight. Matthias swallowed. That is my shame. Clara's hands tightened. My shame is that I believed silence would protect me. Matthias took a slow breath. It should have. Clara gave a small, weary shake of her head. In this world, sir, silence only makes it easier for others to decide what you are. Matthias did not answer immediately, because there was no quick reply that could undo years of truth. He said instead, Will you allow me to speak to Father Anselm about arrangements, at least until the roads are safer tomorrow? Clara hesitated, then nodded once. I will stay here tonight. Good, Matthias said, relief slipping into his voice despite his efforts. Clara stiffened as if even relief from him was dangerous to accept. Matthias stepped back, giving her space. I will not disturb you further. Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Finally she whispered, Why do you care? The question hung between them, raw and simple. Matthias answered carefully, Because you were wronged in my house. Clara's eyes searched his again. Only that? Matthias's voice softened. That is enough. Clara looked down, and her shoulders rose with a small breath that sounded like restraint. Matthias turned toward the door, then paused. Clara. She looked up, guarded again. He said, You said they prepared it. That it felt arranged. Clara nodded slowly. Yes. Matthias's jaw tightened. Then you may be in more danger than you realize. Clara's eyes widened. Danger. He shook his head. Not of physical harm, but of being used, of being blamed again. I do not like how quickly they acted. I do not like burned seals. I do not like neat stories. Clara's hands trembled. I only want to disappear. Matthias met her gaze. I will not let them make you disappear. Clara swallowed hard, and for a second she looked younger, frightened by the weight of being noticed. Matthias opened the door and called softly, Father Anselm. The priest appeared at once, as if he had been listening with a careful ear. Matthias said, She will remain here tonight. Tomorrow I will return with her wages and with a plan. If anyone from the estate comes, do not send her back. Send for me. Father Anselm nodded. I will. Matthias looked at Clara one last time. I will come early. Clara did not curtsy this time. She only whispered, Very well. Matthias left the room. In the small sitting area, Father Anselm walked with him to the front door. The priest spoke quietly. You believe she is innocent? Matthias nodded. Yes. Father Anselm studied him. Then do not treat this like a puzzle, Your Highness. Treat it like a life. Matthias's gaze sharpened. That is why I am here. Father Anselm hesitated, then said, She is not accustomed to kindness. Matthias replied, Neither am I, when it comes from someone who owes me nothing. Father Anselm's expression softened slightly. You have eyes tonight. Matthias opened the door. Cold air rushed in again. He stepped out, then paused on the threshold and turned back. Father, yes? If she wishes to leave tomorrow without seeing anyone from the estate, will you help her? Father Anselm nodded without hesitation. Yes. Matthias held his gaze. Even if I ask you not to? Father Anselm's voice was gentle but firm. If she asks, I will. Matthias nodded once. Good. He mounted his horse and rode back toward the estate, the night pressing close around him. Inside the house, the corridors were quieter now. Many servants had been dismissed to their quarters. The candles burned lower. Matthias walked straight to the steward's office. Kruger stood when he entered as if he had been waiting. Your Highness. Matthias did not sit. Tell me where the packet is. Kruger spread his hands slightly. If I knew, I would place it in your hands. Matthias stared at him. You said Clara could not account for her movements. Yet, you dismissed her before searching properly. Kruger's tone remained smooth. The Baroness wished to make an example. Matthias's voice grew colder. An example is not evidence. Kruger's smile tightened. Your Highness, you cannot allow sentiment to unsettle the household. Matthias leaned forward slightly. You cannot allow your household games to use my name. Kruger's eyes narrowed. Games. Matthias said, I found burned paper in my hearth. Sealed paper. That is not a game to me. Kruger's voice softened into something cautionary. Your Highness, there are matters of correspondence that require discretion. Matthias held still. Discretion is not destruction. Kruger's gaze flicked toward the door, then back. You are tired. Matthias straightened. And you are too comfortable. He turned and left Kruger without dismissal, letting the steward sit with uncertainty for once. Matthias went to Adelheide's drawing room. The Baroness stood near the window, as if she had been waiting for his return. Her expression was composed, but her eyes were sharp. You went to the priest, she said. Matthias did not hide it. Yes. Adelheide's lips pressed thin. You chase a dismissed maid into the night and call it justice. Matthias answered, I call it responsibility. Adelheide's voice turned low. You will embarrass this house. Matthias stepped closer. Who was that packet meant for? Adelheide's chin lifted. Household business. Matthias said, It bore my seal. Adelheide's eyes flashed. And you think that gives a servant the right to meddle? Matthias stared at her. You keep speaking as if Clara is the problem, as if her existence near a corridor is the offense. What are you protecting? Adelheide's composure remained, but her voice sharpened. I am protecting you from your own foolish tenderness. Matthias's mouth tightened. Do not confuse tenderness with principle. Adelheid walked toward him, close enough that her perfume would have been suffocating if he had noticed it. Her gaze locked onto his. You are a prince, she said. You cannot afford to be guided by the tears of a maid. Matthias's voice was steady. Then I will be guided by the truth. Adelheide's face hardened. Truth is a luxury. Matthias replied, Then I will spend it. He turned to leave. Adelheid called after him, If you elevate her, you will invite gossip. Matthias stopped at the door. I am not elevating her. I am correcting you. He left before she could respond. In his study, Matthias locked the door and pulled the scrap from his pocket again. He compared it to stationery in his desk. The thickness matched. The seal impression matched his own. He stared at the partial name line, trying to make sense of it. A sound came from the hallway. A soft footstep, then another, stopping near the door. Matthias opened it sharply. A young maid stood there, eyes wide, hands clasped so tightly her fingers were white. She curtsied so low it looked painful. "Your Highness?" Matthias's voice gentled. "What is it?" She swallowed. I heard you asking about Clara." "Yes," Matthias said. "What do you know?" Her gaze flicked down the corridor. "If they see me—" "I am seeing you," Matthias replied. "Speak." The maid's voice shook. "Clara did not take anything. I saw her. She was carrying linens. She stopped near the study door because she heard something inside." Matthias's eyes narrowed. "What did she hear?" "I do not know," the maid whispered. But then Herr Kruger came from the other end of the corridor. He spoke to Clara. I could not hear the words, but he stood too close. Matthias's jaw tightened. "And then?" "Then Frau Lisa called Clara away," the maid said. "And after that, I saw Herr Kruger go into the study." Matthias held very still. "Alone?" The maid nodded quickly. "Yes." "And later, the fire was lit." Matthias felt something settle into place with a quiet finality. He said, "What is your name?" The maid flinched as if the question itself was dangerous. "Elsa, Your Highness." "Elsa," Matthias said, "you will not be punished for speaking to me." Her eyes filled with fearful hope. "Truly, truly," he replied. "Go now, and say nothing to anyone." She curtsied again and fled down the corridor like a sparrow escaping a hand. Matthias closed the door and stood for a long moment, breathing carefully. So, Kruger had been alone in the study. Kruger had been the one to frame the corridor story. Adelheid had been eager to expel Clara without delay, and Clara, quiet Clara, had been chosen because she would not fight loudly enough to disturb the lie. Matthias's hands curled into fists, then relaxed. He crossed to the window and looked out at the snow-dimmed grounds. Somewhere beyond the trees, the rectory lamp still burned. Clara was there, trying to sleep, trying to decide if she would ever trust anyone again. Matthias turned away from the window and rang the bell for his valet. When the man entered, bowing, Matthias said, "Prepare an envelope with Clara's wages, double what is owed, include funds for travel." "Yes, Your Highness," the valet said, startled but obedient. "And in the morning," Matthias continued, "I want the courier Herr Vogel brought to me, and I want the steward's keys to the records cabinet." The valet blinked. "Your Highness, the steward keeps his keys." Matthias's gaze turned hard. "Then I will borrow them." The valet bowed quickly. At once, when the valet left, Matthias stood alone again. He pulled the scrap from his pocket one more time, then set it on the desk beside a blank sheet. He wrote one sentence, slow and careful as if naming a vow. "I will find the truth." Before dawn, Matthias rode again. This time he brought no escort and no ceremony. Only an envelope tucked inside his coat, and a resolve that would not be soothed by holiday songs. At the rectory, Father Anselm opened the door at once, as if he had expected the knock. "You returned early," the priest said. Matthias nodded. "May I see her?" Father Anselm stepped aside. "She is awake." Matthias entered, and the warmth of the small house hit him again, quiet and honest. Clara stood in the sitting room this time, not in the bedroom. Her hair was pinned more neatly now, as if she had used discipline to bind herself together. She held her bundle in both hands, as if she were ready to flee at any moment. When she saw Matthias, she froze. "Your Highness," she said, and her voice was steadier than the night before. Matthias took out the envelope. "This is yours." Clara stared at it, wary. "What is it?" "Wages owed," Matthias said. "And more, for the road, if you choose it." Clara did not reach for it. "If I take that, they will say you paid me to keep quiet." Matthias's jaw tightened. "Let them say it. Words do not change what you are owed." Clara's hands tightened on her bundle. "In your world, words change everything." Matthias held her gaze. "Then let my words change this. I am telling you openly that you were wronged." Clara swallowed. Her eyes glistened, but she did not cry. She looked as if she had cried all she could. Father Anselm spoke gently from near the doorway. "Clara, take what is offered. There is no sin in receiving justice." Clara's fingers trembled. Slowly she reached out and took the envelope as though it might burn her. Matthias watched her. "Thank you." Clara blinked. "Thank you for accepting it," he said. It means you are not surrendering to their story. Clara lowered her gaze. I am tired, sir. I know, Matthias replied. He hesitated, then said, I spoke to someone in the household. A maid named Elsa. Clara's eyes lifted sharply. Elsa will be punished. She will not, Matthias said at once. Clara's voice tightened. You cannot promise that. Matthias's tone turned firm. I can, because I will not allow it. Clara stared at him, as if trying to decide whether to believe the confidence in his voice. Matthias continued. She saw you near the study. She saw Kruger enter after you left. Clara's face went still. Kruger? Matthias nodded. Yes. Clara's breath caught, and she looked toward Father Anselm, who watched quietly, concerned. Clara whispered, He spoke to me in the corridor. Matthias's eyes narrowed. What did he say? Clara's fingers tightened around the envelope now. He asked if I had seen anything on the desk. He smiled like he was being kind. He said, You are a careful girl, Clara. You see much, even when you think you do not. Matthias's jaw clenched. And you answered. I said I saw nothing, Clara replied. Because I had. I did not look. Matthias let out a slow breath. That was wise. Clara shook her head slightly. It did not save me. No, Matthias said, but it tells me something. Clara's voice trembled. What? Matthias's gaze held hers. They were afraid you might have seen something, or they were afraid you might speak to someone who would believe you. Clara's throat moved. I do not understand why. Matthias hesitated. He could not tell her everything he suspected. Not yet. He did not want to burden her with the weight of a household's rot when she had only just been thrown out of it. He said carefully, Because the packet was not ordinary. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. It was meant for Vienna. Yes, Matthias said. And someone burned part of a sealed document in my hearth. Clara went pale. Burned. Matthias nodded. I found the scrap. Clara's lips parted. She looked as if she might sway. Father Anselm stepped closer. Clara, sit. Clara shook her head stubbornly. I am fine. Matthias watched her face. You are not fine, but you are standing. That is something. Clara's mouth tightened as if the remark almost softened her. Then she fought it back. Matthias said, I want you to come with me. Clara stiffened. To the estate? To the village, Matthias replied. Not the estate. Somewhere public. Somewhere safer than an isolated road. I will arrange lodging. And then I will continue the investigation without leaving you exposed. Clara's eyes widened with alarm. You will place me in lodgings and people will talk. Matthias replied, People already talk. Let them talk while you are warm. Clara's voice rose slightly. You do not understand what it is to be talked about when you have no shield. Matthias's tone softened. Then let me be the shield until you find your own. Clara stared at him. Father Anselm said quietly, Clara, you do not have to accept every offer, but you should not refuse safety out of pride. Clara's eyes glistened again. Pride is the only thing I have that they did not take. Matthias nodded slowly. Then keep it. Come as yourself, not as my servant, not as my guest, as Clara, who is owed safety and time. Clara's breath shook. She looked down at her bundle, then at the envelope, then back at Matthias. I do not trust your household, she whispered. I don't either, Matthias admitted. Not tonight. That admission made her eyes widen. It was not what princes said. Clara said very softly, If I go with you, they will hate me. Matthias shook his head. No. They will hate the fact that you did not vanish quietly. Clara swallowed. And you will tolerate that. Matthias's gaze stayed steady. I will correct it. Clara hesitated. You keep saying that word. Because it is the only honest one, Matthias said. I cannot undo what happened. But I can correct what follows. Clara's shoulders sagged slightly, fatigue winning. I do not know what to do. Father Anselm's voice was gentle. Do what allows you to breathe, child. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her gaze went to Matthias. If I come, she said, it will not be because you are a prince. Matthias replied softly. Good. It will be because I cannot walk another road alone today, she finished. Matthias nodded once. That is enough. Clara took a small step forward, then stopped abruptly as if something inside her had tightened. Matthias noticed her hand move instinctively toward her collar, toward the place where a hidden chain might rest. "What is it?" he asked. Clara's face went tense. "Nothing." Matthias did not press, but his eyes stayed attentive. Clara shifted her bundle from one hand to the other. The movement was small, and yet something slipped loose. A thin chain tucked beneath cloth slid out and swung for a moment before gravity pulled it down. A locket, old and worn, tumbled toward the floor. Clara gasped, reaching for it too late. Matthias caught it before it hit the boards. Clara froze as if the air itself had turned to judgment. "Give it back," she whispered, and there was panic in her voice now, sharp and unfamiliar. Matthias held the locket in his palm. It was not expensive in appearance, but it carried a weight that made his fingers still. "Clara," he said gently, "I am not taking it from you." Her breath shook. "Please." Matthias saw how her hands trembled, how her eyes fixed on the object, as if it were both treasure and threat. He began to close his fingers around it to return it without looking. But the clasp, loosened by age, shifted. The locket sprang open in his palm, revealing a tiny crest and initials that belonged to a noble house he recognized at once. Clara's breath stopped. The locket lay open in Prince Matthias's palm, small as a coin and suddenly heavier than any accusation. The crest inside was clear, stamped into metal with a precision no village jeweler would bother with. The initials beneath it were not decorative. They were a claim. Clara's fingers flew up as if to snatch it away, then froze in midair because reaching toward a prince's hand felt like another crime. "Close it," she whispered. "Please." Matthias didn't move at first, not because he wanted to hold it, because recognition had made him still. Clara saw his eyes change the way a man's gaze changes when he realizes a door he thought was locked has been open all along. "You know it," she said, barely audible. Matthias's voice came out low. "I know the crest." Clara's throat tightened. "You were not meant to." He looked up at her slowly. "Whose crest is this, Clara?" Her lips trembled. "It is not mine." "That is not an answer," he said, not harshly, but firmly. Clara's shoulders rose with a shallow breath. She glanced toward Father Anselm as if hoping he would speak for her, but the priest did not interrupt. He simply watched, ready to steady her if she fell. Clara forced herself to meet Matthias's eyes again. "It belonged to my mother." Matthias closed the locket carefully, as if closing it too fast would injure her. Then he held it out to her, open palm, no command in the gesture. Clara took it with shaking fingers and pressed it to her chest like a shield. Matthias said, "Your mother carried a noble crest." Clara's voice snapped, sharp with fear. "She carried it hidden." Matthias nodded once. "Why?" Clara swallowed. Her eyes shone, but she did not let tears fall. Not now. Not in front of him. "She said it was dangerous," Clara whispered. "She said if anyone saw it, they would ask questions that would swallow me whole." Father Anselm spoke softly. "Clara." Clara flinched, as if even her name could be taken from her. Matthias kept his tone steady. "Did your mother ever tell you what the crest meant?" Clara shook her head quickly. "No, only that I must never show it." "Never." Matthias watched her for a long moment. Then he said, "Clara, listen to me. Whatever this is, it is not a sin you committed." Clara gave a small, bitter sound. "That is what you say, but your household has already decided who I am." Matthias's jaw tightened. "My household will not decide your identity by gossip." Clara's hands tightened around the locket. "I only wanted to work, to be quiet, to earn bread." Matthias's voice softened. "And someone punished you for being near a desk." Clara looked down. "For being near something I was not meant to see." Matthias nodded slowly, as if she had finally said the sentence that unlocked the rest. He turned toward Father Anselm. "I need to keep her safe." Father Anselm's expression remained calm. "Then do so with her consent." Matthias looked back at Clara. "Will you come to the village lodging I mentioned? It is public. It is warm. It is not the estate." Clara hesitated. The locket felt like a burning secret against her palm. "If I go," she said, "they will follow." "Then they will follow into daylight," Matthias replied. Clara's gaze flicked to the door as if she expected Adelheid to step through at any moment with polite condemnation. Father Anselm said, "Clara, you are not alone." Clara swallowed hard. "I am tired of being a problem." Matthias's voice turned firm. "You are not the problem. You are the proof." Clara stared at him. The proof of what? Matthias did not answer directly. He looked as if he were holding back a dozen suspicions until he could place them properly. He said only, "Of why they acted so quickly." Clara's hands trembled. "Then you will keep asking questions." "Yes," Matthias said. "And if your aunt orders you to stop?" Clara asked. Matthias met her gaze. "Then she will discover what it is to be refused." Clara let out a slow breath she did not realize she'd been holding. The air felt thin in her chest. "All right," she whispered. "I will go." Matthias nodded once, as if he had just received a solemn pledge rather than a fragile agreement. They left the rectory together. Clara walked with her bundle and the envelope tucked under her arm, her shoulders stiff, her eyes lowered out of habit even as she tried to lift them. She expected the road to judge her. She expected every passerby to recognize a dismissed maid by the way she held her breath. Matthias walked beside her, not too close. He did not offer his arm, which would have made her feel trapped. But his presence was unmistakable, and that was both comfort and danger. At the small inn near the village square, Matthias spoke to the innkeeper with a calm authority that did not require threats. "A room for her," he said, "one that is quiet and safe." The innkeeper's eyes widened at the sight of him. "Of course, Your Highness, of course." Clara stood near the doorway, heat creeping into her cheeks. She felt eyes on her, not cruel eyes, curious ones. That was almost worse. Matthias glanced at her, reading her discomfort. "No one will trouble you here," he said. Clara's voice was tight. "People trouble without touching." Matthias nodded, as if he accepted the lesson. "Then we will give them nothing to feed on." He turned to the innkeeper. "She is under my protection. She will be treated with respect." "Yes, Your Highness," the innkeeper said quickly, almost bowing. Clara flinched at the phrase "under my protection." It sounded too much like ownership, but Matthias didn't say it possessively. He said it like a shield held between her and the world. When the room was settled, Matthias stood in the doorway, while Clara remained near the window, bundle still clutched like a lifeline. "I will not stay in the room," he said. "I will speak with the innkeeper downstairs, and then I will return to the estate." Clara's eyes widened. "You will leave me?" He shook his head. "Not alone. Father Anselm will come later, and I will send someone I trust." Clara's mouth tightened. "You trust no one in your household." Matthias's lips pressed together. "I trust very few." Clara's voice trembled. "Then why return there?" "Because evidence will not walk into my hands," he replied, "and because they will try to create a story while I am gone." Clara swallowed. "A story about me." "A story about you," Matthias agreed, "and about me, if they can." Clara's fingers tightened around the locket in her pocket. "What will you do?" Matthias's gaze sharpened. "I will look where they did not expect me to look, and I will ask questions they cannot dismiss." Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Your aunt will be angry." Matthias's voice turned quiet. Let her be. He left her with a final look that was not pity, not command. Something else. Attention. And that attention made Clara feel seen in a way she did not yet know how to endure. The moment the door closed, Clara exhaled shakily. The room was simple: a bed, a chair, a small washstand. Ordinary things that felt unfamiliar because no one was ordering her to use them quickly. She set her bundle down and sat on the edge of the chair, hands in her lap, trying to keep them from shaking. She touched the locket through the fabric of her pocket. Her mother's voice, long gone, seemed to whisper the same warning. "Never show it. Never." Clara closed her eyes. Downstairs, the innkeeper approached with careful deference. "Your Highness, will she be all right?" Matthias answered quietly, "Not yet, but she will be." He left the inn and rode back toward the estate with the sky brightening slowly, the kind of pale winter light that made everything look honest even when it wasn't. At the estate, the servants moved as if walking on thin ice. Matthias felt it immediately. Too many bowed heads, too many quick exits from rooms, too much "remember your place" hanging in the air. Kruger met him near the entryway with an expression of practiced concern. "Your Highness," Kruger said, "we were worried. You left without escort." Matthias handed his reins to a groom without looking away from Kruger. "Bring me the records cabinet keys." Kruger blinked. "Your Highness?" The keys, Matthias repeated. Kruger's smile tightened. The cabinet contains accounts and it belongs to this estate, Matthias said. Which belongs to me, Kruger's jaw worked. Of course, Your Highness, it is merely unusual. Matthias stepped closer, his voice dropping. So was burning sealed paper in my hearth. Kruger's eyes flickered again, quick as a misstep. Matthias held out his hand. Kruger hesitated. Then, as if he had no choice but to perform obedience, he reached into his pocket and produced a ring of keys. Matthias took them and turned away at once. He did not go to the drawing room. He did not allow Adelheid the pleasure of a debate. He went straight to the steward's office and locked the door behind him. Inside the cabinet, ledgers were arranged neatly, as if order could replace integrity. Matthias opened them one by one. Outgoing correspondence, incoming deliveries, charitable disbursements, household purchases. The numbers were tidy, too tidy. He scanned entries from the past months, then the past year. Certain amounts repeated with the regularity of a heartbeat, small enough not to raise alarm, steady enough to grow into something meaningful over time. Matthias's gaze narrowed. He pulled out the envelope he'd found hidden behind the false backing days ago. No, he hadn't found it yet. In this block, he must find new irregularities and perhaps a hidden letter. Keep progression. He moved to the drawer beneath Kruger's desk and opened it with one of the keys. Papers carefully stacked, receipts, notes, a sealed packet of blank stationery. Then tucked beneath a ledger, a thin folder tied with ribbon. Matthias's hand stilled over it. He untied the ribbon. Inside were copied pages, not originals, copies of letters, the kind made for record-keeping. The dates were old, several years back. One letter bore a Vienna notary's mark. Matthias read the first lines. His face went still. The letter referenced a charitable endowment administered through several noble households, including this estate as a temporary custodian. It spoke of a claimant, a woman who had served in a house and provided proof of identity, a woman named Elise. Matthias's breath tightened, because the crest inside Clara's locket, he knew it now, belonged to the House of Lichtenfels. He had seen it on invitations, on charity lists, on the seal of a long-standing foundation. A family not connected to him by blood, only by society. And the notary's letter mentioned a claimant tied to that house. Matthias read further, jaw tightening with every sentence. The letter requested the transfer of funds to a designated guardian for the benefit of the child until she reached adulthood. It spoke of discretion to protect the girl from opportunists. It insisted the documents were to be delivered unopened and recorded properly. Matthias's fingers tightened on the paper. A child, Clara. He set the letter down and reached for the next page. It was a note in Kruger's hand, written in careful script. Handled. No further action. Keep the girl quiet. Matthias's stomach turned. A knock came at the door. Matthias slid the papers into the folder quickly and locked the drawer again, then called, "Enter." It was a footman, pale and anxious. "Your Highness," the man said, "Baroness Adelheid requests your presence." Matthias's voice stayed calm. "Tell her I will come when I decide." The footman bowed and fled. Matthias exhaled slowly and looked down at the folder again. So this was not only about a missing packet. This was about years of quiet handling. Matthias left the office, keys in his pocket, and went to his study. He unlocked a side drawer and pulled out his own correspondence file, the one he kept separate from household management. If his seal had been used, there would be a trail. He searched quickly, scanning, sorting, discarding nothing. Then he found it. A receipt from a Vienna courier service for a packet that never reached its destination. The date matched the notary's letter. Matthias's jaw tightened. He heard voices in the hall. Adelheid's voice, crisp, controlled. Kruger's, gentle and persuasive. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. Adelheid stood with her chin lifted. Kruger beside her, posture humble, eyes watchful. Adelheid spoke first. "Matthias, you are disrupting the household. The servants are unsettled." Matthias replied, "Good." Adelheid's eyes flashed. "Good? A household that can dismiss an innocent girl and sleep soundly deserves to be unsettled," Matthias said. Kruger's voice slid in like oil. Your Highness, we do not know she is innocent. Matthias turned his gaze on him. Yes, we do. Kruger's smile tightened. Because she wept prettily at the priest's house. Clara would have shrunk under that sentence, Matthias thought, because cruelty hidden inside politeness was the language she had been trained to accept. Matthias answered coldly, because you entered my study alone after she left the corridor. Kruger's face went still. And because I have read your notes, Matthias added. Adelheide's posture stiffened. Your notes? Matthias looked at his aunt. I have read documents you have no right to conceal. Adelheide's voice sharpened. What are you implying? Matthias held her gaze. That you dismissed Clara to bury a matter that has been buried too long. Adelheide's expression hardened. You speak in riddles, Matthias said. Then I will speak plainly. Someone in this household intercepted notary correspondence and diverted funds. Someone has been using my estate as a hiding place. Kruger's face paled slightly, then smoothed again. Your Highness, you misunderstand the accounts. Endowments are complex. Matthias stepped closer. Complex does not mean secret. Adelheide's voice turned icy. You accuse your own steward on Christmas morning. Matthias replied, I accuse him because evidence exists on Christmas morning, as it did yesterday. Kruger bowed slightly. Your Highness, perhaps we should speak privately. Matthias's eyes narrowed. We are speaking privately. You have made sure of that for years. Adelheide's mouth tightened. This is enough. I will not allow a servant to destabilize the household. Matthias's voice rose just enough to make the corridor feel smaller. She is not destabilizing anything. She is revealing what was already rotten. Adelheide's eyes flashed. Watch your tone. Matthias answered. Watch your conscience. Silence snapped between them. Then Kruger said softly, Where is Clara now? Matthias didn't miss it. Not the question itself, but the quickness behind it. You are concerned, Matthias said. Kruger's expression was practiced. I am concerned for the estate. If she is spreading stories... She is not spreading anything, Matthias said. Adelheide's voice turned sharp. Bring her back. She can be questioned properly. Matthias held his aunt's gaze. No. Adelheid blinked, as if she had not heard correctly. What did you say? I said no, Matthias repeated. You will not question her. You already did. You dismissed her. Adelheid stepped forward. Matthias, you do not understand what scandal does to a family. Matthias replied, I am beginning to understand what secrecy does. He turned away from them and walked down the corridor toward the servants' wing. Adelheid called after him, You will not make a spectacle of this. Matthias did not turn. Then stop behaving as if you have something to hide. He went to Frau Liese and instructed her, in clear terms, that no servant was to be punished for speaking truth to him. Frau Liese's eyes flickered with relief and fear. Yes, Your Highness, she whispered. But they will not, Matthias said. He left the estate again within the hour, riding back toward the village. At the inn, the innkeeper met him at once, wringing his hands. Your Highness, the man said, there was a visitor. Matthias's stomach tightened. Who? A gentleman, the innkeeper said quickly. Polite, well-dressed. Said he came from the estate with a message. Matthias's voice turned cold. Where is Clara? In her room, the innkeeper said, but she was frightened. He insisted. Matthias moved past him without waiting. He climbed the stairs in 2 quick strides and knocked once, firmly. Clara, he said. It is me. He heard a small, sharp inhale inside, then hurried footsteps. The door opened a crack. Clara's face appeared, pale and tense. Your Highness. Matthias stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Clara clutched the locket in her fist. The chain was visible now, as if fear had pulled it out of hiding. He came, she said quickly. A man from the estate. Matthias's eyes narrowed. What did he say? Clara's voice shook. He said the Baroness regrets the misunderstanding. He said I am invited to return at once to receive pardon. Matthias's mouth tightened. Pardon. As if you asked for forgiveness. Clara swallowed. He said I must sign a statement. Matthias went still. A statement. Clara nodded, eyes wide. He had papers. He said it was only a form. That I must confirm I left willingly and that I will not speak of it again. Matthias's jaw clenched. Did you sign? Clara shook her head quickly. No. I told him I wanted Father Anselm. He said Father Anselm is not part of household affairs. He said I should be grateful for mercy. Matthias's voice dropped. Who was the man? Clara hesitated. I do not know his name. He wore gloves. He smiled too much. Matthias turned toward the door. Where is he now? The innkeeper's voice came from outside, muffled. He is downstairs, Your Highness. Matthias looked back at Clara. Stay here. Lock the door. Clara's voice caught. He will return. He will not, Matthias said. Clara's eyes searched his, frightened by the certainty. You promise? Matthias nodded once. I promise. He left her room and went downstairs. The man stood near the hearth in the common room, posture relaxed as if he belonged there. He was indeed well dressed, not a servant, a clerk perhaps, or a minor official accustomed to being obeyed by those with less power. When he saw Matthias, his smile faltered for a fraction. He bowed. Your Highness. Matthias stopped a few feet away. Who sent you? The man's smile returned, cautious. Baroness Adelheid, Your Highness. She wishes to correct an unfortunate— Give me the papers, Matthias said. The man blinked. Your Highness, these are simply forms to ensure no misunderstanding continues. Give them to me, Matthias repeated, calm as ice. The man hesitated. Then, slowly, he produced the papers from his leather folio and offered them. Matthias took them and scanned the lines. It was written in polite legal language, but the meaning was plain. Clara would attest she had been dismissed for cause, that she accepted the dismissal, that she would not pursue any claim, that she would not speak of household documents, and that she waived any future complaint. Matthias's jaw tightened. He looked up. This is coercion. The man's smile thinned. No one is forcing her, Your Highness. It is merely prudent. Matthias folded the papers once, carefully. Who drafted this? A legal clerk in Vienna, the man said quickly. It is standard. It is not standard to send a stranger to corner a frightened girl, Matthias replied. The man's eyes darted toward the innkeeper, then back. Your Highness, the Baroness only wishes to protect the estate. Matthias stepped closer. The estate does not need protection from Clara. The man swallowed. Perhaps the estate needs protection from gossip. Matthias's voice turned sharper. The only gossip here is the lie you brought with you. The man's face reddened. Your Highness, I must insist. Matthias held up a hand, and the man stopped as if struck by a wall. Matthias said, You will return to the estate and tell Baroness Adelheid that Clara will sign nothing. She will not be pressured, persuaded, or cornered again. If she receives one more paper, I will place the matter directly into Vienna's official channels. The man blinked, clearly calculating what that would mean. Matthias added, And tell Herr Kruger that I have begun reading his private records. The man's smile vanished entirely. Your Highness, Matthias's tone remained calm. Go. The man bowed stiffly and left, his boots clicking on the floorboards as if trying to regain dignity by sound. The innkeeper exhaled. Your Highness, I did not know what to do. Matthias glanced at him. You did well to send for me. He went back upstairs. Clara opened the door immediately, as if she had not breathed since he left. Matthias held up the papers. These are gone. Clara's shoulders sagged with visible relief, and then she remembered herself and stiffened again, as if relief were too intimate. He will not return, she asked. No, Matthias said, and if anyone else comes, the innkeeper will send for me at once. Clara's voice was small. Why are they trying so hard? Matthias looked at her, and this time he did not shield the truth entirely. Because you are connected to something they do not want uncovered, he said. Clara's fingers tightened around the locket. This, Matthias nodded. Yes. Clara's breath shook. My mother only wanted me safe, and someone made safety depend on silence, Matthias said. Clara whispered, I do not even know what I am. Matthias's voice softened. You are Clara. Clara's eyes filled again. She blinked hard. That feels too small for what they are doing. Matthias stepped closer, careful, stopping at a respectful distance. It is not small. Not to you. Clara's voice trembled. I am frightened. Matthias nodded. I know. Clara looked at him, and for the first time her shyness shifted into something else, a quiet demand. Then do not leave me to their stories again, she said. Matthias's throat tightened. I won't. Clara's eyes stayed on his. Say it plainly. Matthias answered, I will not let them ruin you. The words landed between them heavy and strange, because no one had ever spoken of Clara as someone who could be ruined. She had always been treated as someone who could be discarded. Clara swallowed. All right. Matthias drew a slow breath. Now I must return to the estate again, but I will not go blind this time. Clara's gaze sharpened. What will you do? Matthias's voice turned controlled. I will secure the documents. I will speak to a notary in Vienna if I must, and I will make sure the next conversation happens where witnesses exist. Clara's hands trembled. Witnesses. Matthias nodded. No more private punishments. No more quiet expulsions. Clara hesitated, then whispered, If this crest belongs to someone, will they take me away? Matthias shook his head. No one will take you anywhere without your consent. Clara stared at him, as if that sentence were more foreign than a noble crest. Matthias said, Rest. Eat something. Father Anselm will come later. Clara nodded, though her face showed she doubted she could truly rest. Matthias left again, carrying the weight of her fear with him. At the estate, he went straight to his study and locked the door. He placed the coerced statement on the desk like a trophy of their desperation. Then he pulled the folder from Kruger's drawer again and reread the notary letter, slower this time. He traced the lines that referenced the claimant's proof, the crest and the child. A second letter lay beneath it, older, with the notary's mark again. Matthias unfolded it. This one was addressed to him, formally, as the estate's temporary custodian of the endowment's disbursement. But the letter had never been opened. It had been resealed, as if someone had tried to hide the fact that it had been handled. Matthias's fingers tightened. He broke the seal. Inside was a thin packet, a formal claim, a record of deposited funds, and a document naming the beneficiary. Matthias's eyes moved across the page until they reached the name line. His breath stopped because the name was not simply Clara, and it was not simply a servant's mark on paper. It was a full, noble designation tied to the House of Lichtenfels, naming her as the rightful beneficiary of the endowment and the holder of a suppressed identity, Clara von Lichtenfels. Clara did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the inn bed with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached. Every sound in the hallway made her shoulders lift. Every pause made her listen harder. When the knock came, she flinched anyway. Clara, Prince Matthias called through the door. It is me, may I come in? Her throat tightened. She stood, smoothed her skirt out of habit, then realized she did not have to perform for anyone in this room. Still, the old reflex ruled her hands. Yes, Your Highness, she said, and opened the door. Matthias stepped inside. He did not smile. He looked as though he had been carrying a weight that refused to set itself down. Behind him, Father Anselm stood in the hallway, his face calm and watchful. Matthias glanced at the priest. Will you join us, Father? I would prefer Clara not be alone when she hears this. Clara's stomach dropped. Here's what? She whispered. Father Anselm stepped inside, closing the door gently. I am here. Matthias looked at Clara. His voice was controlled, but there was something careful in it, as if he were handling glass. I found the packet, he said. Clara's breath caught. The one they accused me of taking. Yes, he replied, and I found other documents tied to it. Clara's fingers curled into her palm. So they will stop calling me a thief. They will, Matthias said. But that is not the only matter. Clara stared at him. Her mouth felt dry. What else is there? Matthias took a folded paper from inside his coat. He did not hold it out at once. He seemed to be deciding how much to say and how. Clara's voice trembled. Your Highness, please, do not make it worse. I am trying to make it true, he said quietly. Father Anselm's gaze stayed on Clara. Breathe, child. Clara tried. Her chest rose too fast. Matthias said, The crest in your locket belongs to the House of Lichtenfels. Clara swallowed. Yes. You told me it belonged to your mother, Matthias continued. It did, Clara replied quickly. I never claimed anything else. Matthias nodded. I believe you. Clara's eyes burned. Then why do you look like that? Matthias hesitated, then spoke plainly. Because the documents name you. Clara froze. Name me. Matthias unfolded the paper and held it so she could see without taking it. He kept his fingers at the edges, as if even touching the words too much might feel like taking ownership. Clara's gaze dropped to the page. Her name sat there longer than she had ever written it. Clara von Lichtenfels. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard. The letters did not change. No, she whispered. Father Anselm's voice was steady. Clara backed a step as if distance could protect her from ink. No, that is not, I am not. Matthias's voice softened. You are not related to me, Clara. Not by blood, not by any line. The House of Lichtenfels is separate from my own. But the paper says you are the beneficiary of an endowment tied to that family. Clara stared at him, as if he were speaking another language. Beneficiary. Matthias nodded. A charitable fund. Money set aside for your education and protection. It should have reached you years ago. Clara's throat worked. Years ago. Yes, Matthias said. And it did not. Clara's hands began to shake, not from cold. So, they kept it. Matthias's jaw tightened. Someone did. Clara turned her head toward Father Anselm, her eyes wide. My mother, she said never show the locket. She said people would take things from me. Father Anselm stepped closer. Your mother tried to shield you. Clara's voice rose, then broke. By making me small, by making me silent. Matthias did not interrupt. He let the truth come out, because it had been trapped too long. Clara pressed her fingertips to her mouth, trying to stop herself from shaking. If this is true, then my whole life has been a lie built around fear, Matthias said. Clara snapped her eyes to him. And you found this in your house? Matthias nodded. In the steward's records. Clara's face hardened, and that hardness looked strange on her, as if it had been waiting in the shadows for permission to exist. So it was not about a packet, she said, voice low. It was about me. Matthias answered quietly, yes. Clara's chest tightened. Then they will come again. Not with papers this time, with stories, with smiles, with traps. Matthias's voice turned firm. Not if we place this in proper hands today, Father Anselm asked. What do you intend? Matthias held Clara's gaze. Vienna, a notary, a witness, official confirmation, quietly but formally. Once it is recorded, it cannot be erased by household cruelty. Clara's lips parted. Vienna. Matthias nodded. You will not go alone. Father Anselm may come if you wish, and I will be present, but I will not speak over you. Clara shook her head slowly, panic rising. I am not made for official rooms. Father Anselm's voice was gentle. You are made to tell the truth. Clara whispered. Truth has never helped me. Matthias answered. Not because truth is weak, because it was kept from anyone with power. Clara's eyes stung again. She looked down at the paper in his hands. If I accept this, am I stealing something that was never mine to begin with? Matthias's expression tightened. Clara, it was set aside for you. Someone stole it from you. Clara's breath shook. And if the House of Lichtenfels rejects me, Matthias said, this endowment is not about belonging at their table. It is about what was legally promised, and it will be confirmed by the notary who holds the records. Clara turned her face away, fighting tears that felt too big for her body. I do not know how to be anyone other than a maid. Father Anselm placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. You do not have to become someone else overnight. Matthias added, you only have to be Clara, in a room where Clara is finally believed. Clara's throat tightened. She nodded once, small and shaky. All right. Matthias exhaled as if he had been holding his breath since Christmas Eve. Then we go. The carriage ride to Vienna felt unreal to Clara, even with Father Anselm beside her. She kept her gloved hands in her lap and tried not to look out the window too much, as if the world might accuse her of traveling above her station. Matthias sat opposite. He did not speak constantly. He watched her face, as if he were learning a language he should have learned years ago. At last Clara whispered, if this is recorded, what happens to them? Matthias answered, to Kruger, Consequences. To my aunt. Loss of authority over the household. Clara's eyes widened. You will punish your aunt. Matthias's mouth tightened. I will stop her from doing this again. Clara swallowed. And you will not blame me when society is offended. His gaze held hers. Let society be offended by accountability. Clara's voice turned smaller. You speak as if it is easy. Matthias shook his head. It is not easy. It is necessary. When they arrived, the notary's office was quieter than Clara expected. No grand hall, no spectacle, just polished order and serious faces. The notary, Herr Weiss, rose when Matthias entered and bowed. Then his eyes moved to Clara, and the bow he gave her was different. Not fawning, not mocking. Formal respect. Miss Clara, Herr Weiss said, reading from a file, thank you for coming. Clara nearly faltered at being addressed so directly. She glanced at Matthias, who gave a subtle nod as if to say, speak when you are ready. Father Anselm stood slightly behind her, a steady presence. Herr Weiss gestured to a chair. Please sit. This will be conducted properly and with care. Clara sat. Her hands trembled. She pressed them together under the desk so no one would see. Herr Weiss opened a ledger and a sealed file. We have held records related to the Lichtenfels endowment for many years. There has been irregularity in disbursement. Matthias's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. Herr Weiss looked at Clara. Your mother's name was Elise. Elise of Lichtenfels' bloodline, though not publicly acknowledged in her time. She provided proof of identity to this office. Her instructions were clear. Protection for her child. Clara's breath caught. She heard her mother's name spoken aloud, and it felt like someone opening a locked room in her chest. Herr Weiss continued. The crest you carry is part of that proof. Clara's voice came out faint. I never wanted it. Herr Weiss nodded. Many do not want the burdens that come with truth. Clara swallowed, then forced herself to ask, what does it mean for me? It means, Herr Weiss said, that funds were deposited for your benefit, and they have not been delivered as intended. It also means the name Clara von Lichtenfels appears on the legal record as the rightful beneficiary. Clara's throat tightened. Then why was I a maid? Herr Weiss's expression stayed professional, but his eyes softened slightly. Because people sometimes find it easier to hide a child than to admit wrongdoing. Matthias's voice was quiet. Show her the disbursement trail. Herr Weiss turned a page and slid a document toward Clara. These transfers were meant to go to a guardian and later to you. Instead, they were routed through your estate as temporary custodian. Clara stared at the lines. Numbers, dates, words she barely understood. Yet one thing was clear. The money had moved, and none of it had reached her hands. Her voice shook. So they lived on it. Matthias answered, controlled anger beneath his calm. Yes. Herr Weiss cleared his throat. For this to be recorded beyond dispute, we require two things. Your confirmation of identity and your consent to claim what is yours. Clara's hands trembled harder. My confirmation. How? Herr Weiss said, the crest, for one, and a written statement in your hand. Nothing elaborate, simply your name as you know it and acknowledgement that you are the daughter of Elise. Clara stared at the pen offered to her as if it were a blade. Not because it was dangerous, but because writing felt like stepping out from behind a curtain. Father Anselm leaned closer. Clara, you have written your name before, Clara whispered. Not like this. Matthias spoke softly. No one here will laugh at your hand. Clara's eyes flicked up to him. And no one will use it against me. Matthias answered, not here. Clara took the pen. Her fingers shook so much she nearly dropped it. She steadied her wrist with her other hand. She wrote slowly, Clara. Then, after a brief pause that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, she wrote the rest. Von Lichtenfels. Her vision blurred again. She blinked, and the ink remained. Herr Weiss nodded once, satisfied. Very good. Clara set the pen down and stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. Herr Weiss said, Now, the irregularity must be addressed. We will notify the appropriate authorities and demand restitution. This can be handled with discretion given your position and your safety. Clara's mouth tightened. Discretion, that word again. Matthias said, discretion in process. Not discretion in truth. Herr Weiss glanced at Matthias. Your Highness, the estate steward's records will be required. Matthias replied, They will be provided. Herr Weiss nodded. Then we will proceed. There will be a formal notice sent, and there will be consequences. Clara's breath shook. What kind of consequences? Herr Weiss answered carefully. Removal from position, financial accountability, social correction. I cannot promise comfort, but I can promise record. Clara looked down at the paper with her new name and felt something unfamiliar beneath fear. Not triumph, not pride. A thin, steady line of dignity. When they left the office, Clara stood on the street outside and drew in cold air that felt strangely clean. Father Anselm watched her face. How do you feel? Clara's voice was quiet. Like I've been living inside someone else's decision, Matthias said, and now you have made your own. Clara looked at him, and for a second she did not see a prince. She saw a man who had chosen to stand in an uncomfortable place because it was right. Her voice trembled. If I had not been named on that paper, would you still have looked for me? Matthias did not answer quickly. He did not offer a pretty lie. He said, I would like to say yes, without hesitation. Clara's chest tightened. Matthias continued, But the truth is, I might have accepted their story if I had not returned that night and found evidence. That is my shame. I was raised to believe the household ran itself. I was wrong. Clara swallowed. So I was invisible until you saw smoke. Matthias's jaw clenched. Yes, and I hate that about myself. Clara looked away, blinking hard. Honesty is a strange kindness. Matthias's voice softened. It is the only kind I trust. Clara's fingers tightened on the edge of her shawl. I do not know if I can forgive you. Matthias nodded once. Then do not. Not yet. Clara's eyes flicked to him. Not yet. I am not asking for a quick pardon, he said. I am asking for time to correct what I allowed. Clara let out a slow breath. Time, Father Anselm said gently. Time is sometimes the first mercy. They returned to the estate later that day, not with celebration, but with purpose. Clara did not enter through the servants' back door. She stepped in through a side entrance used for formal visitors, because Matthias refused to let her be hidden again. The staff's eyes followed her, startled and uncertain. Clara kept her chin level. Her legs felt weak, but she did not let them see it. Adelheid met them in the main corridor, her expression stiff with offense. What is this? She demanded, her gaze cutting toward Clara, as if Clara were dirt brought in on a boot. Matthias's voice was calm. This is the consequence of your haste. Adelheid's eyes flashed. You bring her back into my house after your accusation, Matthias corrected. Adelheid's jaw tightened. Matthias, you have embarrassed us. Matthias replied, You embarrassed yourself. The notary in Vienna has confirmed her identity and the existence of the endowment. They have also confirmed irregularities connected to our estate stewardship. Adelheid's face went still. Irregularities. Kruger appeared from the adjoining hallway as if summoned by the sound of danger. His posture was composed, but his eyes were too alert. Your Highness, he said smoothly, surely there has been a misunderstanding. The Baroness has managed the household with theft-wearing gloves, Matthias said, voice low. Clara flinched at the word, but she kept her posture steady. Kruger's smile faltered. Your Highness? Matthias turned slightly toward Clara, speaking so she could hear. You do not have to speak unless you wish to. Clara's fingers tightened around her own hands. Then she surprised herself. I wish to, she said softly. Adelheid's head snapped toward her. How dare you? Clara's voice shook, but it did not break. You dismissed me and called it discipline. You said I was dishonest. You sent me into the snow with nothing and called it a lesson. Kruger's eyes narrowed slightly. Clara looked at him, and her shyness turned into a quiet, steady courage. You asked me what I saw near the study. You stood too close and smiled as if kindness could make me forget my fear. Kruger's voice remained smooth. Miss Clara, you are overwrought. Clara's cheeks heated, but she held her ground. No, I am finally heard. Matthias stepped forward, placing himself between her and their gaze without touching her. Enough. He turned to Kruger. You are removed from your position as steward, effective immediately. You will surrender keys, records, and correspondence. You will cooperate with the notary's inquiry. Kruger's face tightened. Your Highness, you cannot do this without— I can, Matthias said, calm and final. Adelheide's voice rose. Matthias, you will not destroy a man's livelihood on a servant girl's word. Matthias's gaze turned cold. Not on her word, on documents, on notes in his own hand, on diverted funds, on a coerced statement sent to silence her. Adelheide's composure cracked. Coerced statement. Matthias lifted the papers he had taken at the inn. This, signed by no one, because Clara refused. Clara's breath caught. She had not known he would bring that into the open here, in front of Adelheide's perfect hallway. Adelheide's face went pale with fury. You will regret this. Matthias replied, Perhaps, but I will regret more if I do nothing. Kruger's polite mask slipped for a moment, revealing something small and mean underneath. Your Highness, you think you are saving her, but she will bring scandal. Matthias's voice did not rise. She brought no scandal. You brought wrongdoing. Kruger swallowed. His eyes flicked to Adelheid, seeking rescue. Adelheide's lips pressed thin. Matthias, you are letting sentiment guide you. Matthias answered, No, I am letting accountability guide me. And as for you, Aunt Adelheid, you will no longer manage this household. You will remain here as family, but you will not command servants, dismiss staff, or handle records. Adelheid stared at him as if he had struck her. You would strip me of my authority. Matthias replied, You misused it. Adelheide's voice went tight. For what? For a girl. Matthias glanced toward Clara. For a person. Silence stretched. Clara felt every gaze pressing on her. Her instinct screamed to step back, to apologize for existing, to make herself smaller so the world would not punish her for taking up space. Instead, she heard her own voice, quiet but clear. I do not want revenge. Adelheide's eyes narrowed. How noble of you. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she did not fold. I want my life back, and I want no other girl to be thrown out like I was. Matthias looked at her with something like respect that made Clara's throat tighten. Father Anselm stepped forward slightly. Then let this house learn. Adelheide's gaze snapped to the priest, offended that he stood in her corridor at all, but Matthias spoke first. The notary's inquiry will proceed, he said. Kruger will cooperate. The diverted amounts will be calculated and returned. Kruger's voice was strained. Returned to whom? Matthias turned toward Clara. To her and to the endowment, as intended. Clara's breath shook. Money sounded unreal. She had lived on wages counted in small coins. The idea of a fund meant for her felt like a story told to someone else. Adelheide's voice turned sharp. And what will you do with her now, Matthias? Dress her in silk and parade her through Vienna. Clara flinched at the image. Matthias's answer was immediate. I will do what I should have done from the beginning. I will ask her what she wants. Adelheid scoffed. Servants do not decide. Matthias said, She is not your servant. Clara's heart stuttered. Not your servant. The words were simple, yet they shifted something inside her. Matthias looked at Clara. His voice softened, only for her. Tell me. Clara swallowed. Her voice came out small at first. I want to learn. Adelheide's lips parted, almost laughing. Clara lifted her chin. I want to read without stumbling. I want to write without fear. I want to work, but not as someone who can be discarded without consequence. Matthias nodded once. Done. Clara's eyes widened. It is not that simple. It can be, Matthias said, if you allow it to be. Clara's fingers tightened. And I want to choose where I live. Matthias's gaze held hers. Yes. Clara's voice trembled. And I want to know the truth about my mother. Not rumors, not whispers, truth. Matthias answered, Herr Weiss will provide what he can, and I will not hide anything I find. Clara looked down, then back up, braver now. And I want you to stop saying you will protect me as if I am an object. Matthias blinked, then nodded. You are right. Clara's cheeks burned at her own boldness, yet Matthias did not punish her for it. He accepted it. He said quietly, Then I will say it differently. I will stand beside you while you protect yourself. Clara's throat tightened. She nodded once. Adelheid watched, rigid with disbelief, as if the house had turned upside down in one afternoon. Matthias looked at his aunt. You may disapprove, you may be offended, but you will not interfere. Adelaide's voice was cold. You have changed. Matthias answered, I have been forced to see. Adelaide's eyes flicked to Clara with a look that promised future contempt. But Matthias's presence cut the promise short. Frau Lisa, Matthias called. The housekeeper stepped forward quickly, eyes wide. You will oversee the transition of stewardship, Matthias said. A temporary accountant from Vienna will arrive within days. Until then, all records remain sealed. No one removes papers from the study. No one approaches Clara with demands. Is that understood? Frau Lisa bowed. Yes, Your Highness. Matthias turned back to Clara. You do not have to remain here tonight. You may return to the inn or to Father Anselm. Clara's stomach tightened at the thought of these halls. Yet another part of her, a new part, wanted to stand in the place that had humiliated her and not be chased out again. She whispered, I will return to the inn. Matthias nodded. I will have a maid accompany you who answers to Frau Lisa, not to my aunt. Adelaide's mouth tightened, as if even that was an insult. Clara took a slow breath. Your Highness. Matthias looked at her. She hesitated, then spoke. Thank you for listening. Matthias's expression softened slightly. Thank you for speaking. They walked out together, and for the first time Clara did not feel like a ghost passing through a house that refused to acknowledge her. She felt, strangely, like a person with a name that could not be erased by a baroness's mood. Outside, as the carriage waited, Clara paused on the step. Her hands trembled again, but not from fear alone. Matthias stood beside her, keeping a respectful distance. Clara whispered, If I become someone they must bow to on paper, will that make me hard? Matthias's voice was quiet. It can make you free if you let it. Clara's eyes stung. Freedom feels frightening. Matthias nodded. It should. It means you have choices, and choices can be heavy at first. Clara looked down at her gloved hands. You have choices every day. Matthias's mouth tightened. And I used them poorly. Clara lifted her gaze, then used them better. The words came out before she could soften them. She expected offense. Matthias only nodded once, as if she had given him an order he intended to obey. As the carriage door opened, Clara hesitated. Will Vienna speak of this? Matthias answered, Vienna will always speak. But now, the record speaks louder. Clara's breath shook. And if your aunt never forgives me? Matthias looked at her steadily. You do not need her forgiveness. You need your own life. Clara's eyes filled, and this time she let one tear fall without shame. She wiped it away quickly, annoyed at herself. Matthias's voice softened. You are allowed to feel it. Clara whispered, I do not know what I am allowed. Matthias replied, Then we will learn together, one day at a time. Clara returned to the inn that evening, with her chin lifted and her heart shaking. She had not expected the estate to feel smaller than the street outside it, yet it did. Not because the walls had changed, but because her fear had finally been named. In her room she sat with the envelope Matthias had given her, and the papers from the notary's office folded carefully inside her bundle. She did not open the envelope again. She did not count. She was afraid that if she counted, she would feel like a thief in her own life. There was another knock. Clara's shoulders rose. Then she recognized the rhythm. Steady, patient. Clara, Father Anselm called softly. May I come in? She opened the door at once. The priest stepped inside, holding a small parcel wrapped in plain paper. I brought bread, he said, as if bread could solve what ink had undone. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you, Father. He set it on the table, then studied her face. You stood in that corridor today. Clara nodded slowly. Yes. And you spoke. Clara's lips pressed together. Yes. Father Anselm gave a small nod of approval. How did it feel? Clara sat, hands folded. Like walking without shoes. Everything hurts, but you realize you have feet. Father Anselm's mouth softened. That is a very honest answer. Clara looked down. I do not know what happens next. The priest sat across from her. What do you want to happen next? Clara blinked. The question still startled her. I want to learn, she whispered. I told him that, and it sounded bold, but I meant it. Father Anselm nodded. Then you will. Clara's fingers tightened. And I want to stop feeling ashamed when I am treated fairly. That will take time, he said. Clara's eyes stung. Everything takes time. Father Anselm watched her quietly for a moment, then asked, "And what do you want with Prince Matthias?" Clara's breath caught. "With him," she repeated, as if the word were too personal. "Yes," Father Anselm said gently, "because you are not only facing documents, you are facing a man who has begun to look at you." Clara's cheeks warmed. She turned her head slightly away. "He looks at me as if he is trying to make amends." Father Anselm's voice stayed calm. "And do you believe him?" Clara hesitated. "I believe he is trying." "That is not the same as trust," Father Anselm said. "No," Clara whispered. "It is not." The priest leaned forward just slightly. "Clara, you are allowed to admire a man's effort and still protect your heart." Clara swallowed. "My heart has always been protected by being quiet." Father Anselm shook his head. "No, it was protected by being unseen. That is not protection. That is disappearance." Clara's eyes filled and she blinked hard. "I do not want to disappear again." "Then do not," he said simply. A pause. Clara whispered, "Do you think he will ask me to forgive him?" Father Anselm answered, "He may, but I suspect he will ask you something else first." Clara looked up. "What?" The priest's eyes were kind. "To choose." Clara exhaled shakily. "Choosing is frightening." Father Anselm nodded. "Yes, because it makes your life yours." Another knock came, this one quieter. Father Anselm rose. "That will be him." Clara's chest tightened. "You do not know." The priest gave a small smile. "I know the sound of a man who does not wish to frighten someone." He went to the door and opened it. Prince Matthias stood in the hallway, coat still on, as if he had not allowed himself the comfort of sitting since leaving the estate. He bowed his head to Father Anselm. "Father," Matthias said, "may I speak with her?" Father Anselm stepped aside. "You may, and I will remain nearby." Matthias entered and stopped, not crossing the room immediately. He looked at Clara as if he were checking that she was real. Clara rose out of habit. "You need not stand," Matthias said. Clara remained standing anyway. "I do not know what I need yet." Matthias nodded once, accepting it without offense. Father Anselm moved to the corner near the window, quietly present, not intruding, only ensuring Clara did not feel alone. Matthias took a slow breath. "The notary has begun formal notices." Clara's fingers tightened in front of her. "So it is. Moving." "It is," he said. "And Kruger has been ordered to hand over every record. Frau Lisa will supervise until the Vienna accountant arrives." Clara's voice was small. "And your aunt." Matthias's jaw tightened. "She is furious." Clara gave a tiny, humorless exhale. "I expected that." Matthias's gaze held hers. "She will not touch you." Clara looked down. "You said you would stop saying it that way." Matthias blinked, then nodded. "You are right." He corrected himself at once, voice careful. "She will not interfere with you, because you will not permit it. And neither will I." Clara's throat tightened at the difference. Matthias continued. "I came to ask how you are." Clara looked up, startled again by the simplicity. "How I am," she repeated. "Yes," he said. Clara's voice trembled. "I am ashamed that a piece of paper can change how people treat me." Matthias's expression softened. "That shame belongs to society, not to you." Clara swallowed. "I am frightened, and also angry." Matthias nodded. "Good." Clara blinked. "Good. Yes," he said quietly. "Because anger is often the first sign that your spirit believes it deserved better." Clara's eyes stung. "I did deserve better." Matthias's gaze stayed steady. "You did." A pause. Clara's voice lowered. "What do you want from me, Your Highness?" Matthias flinched slightly at the title, as if it placed distance he did not want. He answered, "I want you to have what was kept from you." Clara's fingers tightened. "That is the just answer." Matthias nodded. "Yes." Clara held his gaze. "And the honest answer." Matthias was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I want to know you." Clara's breath caught, sharp and quiet. Father Anselm did not move. His presence was steady, allowing the moment to be Clara's. Clara's cheeks warmed, and she hated that her body reacted before she had decided what she felt. Matthias continued, not rushing. "Not as a cause I correct, not as a name on a document. As Clara, Clara swallowed. You cannot know me. Not truly. Our worlds do not make my world an excuse, Matthias said, and his voice carried a controlled intensity that made her look up fully. He softened immediately. Forgive me. I did not mean to sound harsh. Clara's fingers twisted. It is not harsh, it is strange to hear you resist excuses. Matthias's mouth tightened. I have lived on them. Clara's voice was careful. Why are you doing this? Matthias looked at her for a long moment, then said, Because I cannot undo what happened, but I can decide who I become after it. Clara's throat tightened. You speak as if I changed you. Matthias answered, You revealed me. A quiet silence fell. Father Anselm cleared his throat softly, not to interrupt, but to remind them both that breath still existed. Clara finally whispered, If you want to know me, you must accept that I may choose to leave. Matthias nodded at once. Yes. Clara's eyes searched his. Without punishment, yes, he repeated. Without persuasion disguised as kindness, she added, voice trembling. Matthias's gaze held hers. Yes. Clara's breath shook. Then you must accept that I may never forgive you quickly, Matthias said quietly. I have accepted that since the moment you said my knowledge was never required. Clara's cheeks warmed again, and she turned her face slightly away, embarrassed by the intimacy of being remembered so precisely. Matthias took a small step closer, careful. May I sit? Clara nodded once. He sat on the chair near the table, not too near her, not too far, choosing balance as if it mattered. Clara sat again as well, hands still trembling. Matthias spoke softly. Tomorrow is Christmas Day. Clara's mouth tightened. I had forgotten it could still be Christmas. Matthias's eyes lowered briefly. That is on me. Clara shook her head. It is on them. On all of them. Matthias nodded. Yes. Clara looked at the bread parcel Father Anselm brought. I have nothing to give anyone. Father Anselm's voice came gently. Then give yourself rest, Clara. That is enough. Matthias looked at Father Anselm, then back to Clara. Will you attend the chapel service tomorrow? Clara hesitated. People will stare. They may, Matthias said, but Father Anselm will be there, and I will be there. Not as display, as presence. Clara's fingers tightened. Do you always place yourself where the eyes are? Matthias's mouth tightened. No, that is what I am learning. Clara exhaled shakily. All right, I will go. Father Anselm nodded. Good. Matthias stood. Then I will not keep you longer tonight. Clara looked up quickly. You will go back? Yes, he said. There is still work to do. Clara's voice was small. Do not let them twist it again. Matthias met her gaze. They will try. They will fail. After he left, Clara sat for a long time in the quiet, listening to the inn settle. Father Anselm remained a while, then rose. I will see you at the chapel, he said. Clara nodded. Yes, Father. When she was alone, she finally opened the envelope. She did not count the money at first. She only stared at it as if it were a strange creature. Then she counted once, carefully, because fear had made her precise her whole life. It was more than she had ever held at once. She covered it again and whispered into the empty room, Mother, what were you trying to keep me from? Her voice broke on the last word, but she did not scold herself for it. On Christmas morning, Clara walked to the chapel with Father Anselm. The village air was sharp and the sky pale, but she did not hide her face. Inside, heads turned. Not all were unkind. Some were simply startled to see her in a better coat and with a posture that did not apologize. A woman whispered behind a glove. A man leaned toward another. Clara felt it, every ripple of talk like wind against skin. She kept walking. Prince Matthias stood near the back, not at the front. When he saw her, he did not stride forward dramatically. He simply bowed his head, as if acknowledging her as a person in a room that had once treated her as furniture. Clara sat beside Father Anselm. Matthias sat a few benches away, close enough that she could see him without turning her head. During the hymns, Clara's voice barely emerged at first. Then, on the second verse, she sang quietly. Not beautifully, not loudly, but she sang. After the service, people lingered, as people always do when curiosity feels like a holiday rite. Clara stepped outside and drew in cold air. Her breath trembled, but it was hers. Matthias approached slowly, careful of the crowd. "Clara," he said. She turned toward him. For a moment he looked almost uncertain, as if a prince could be uncertain. "You came," he said. Clara answered, "I said I would." He nodded, a small smile flickering and fading. "May we walk a little?" Clara's eyes moved to the villagers. "They will watch." Matthias replied, "Let them." Clara hesitated, then nodded once. They walked along the chapel path, away from the cluster of people. Not far, just enough that their words would not be swallowed by gossip. Matthias glanced at her hands. "Are you cold?" Clara answered, "I have been colder." Matthias's mouth tightened. "I know." Clara stopped walking. Matthias stopped with her, not crowding. She looked up at him and said, "I have been thinking of your question." "I did not ask a question," he said quietly. Clara's voice trembled. "You did. You asked what I wanted, even if you did not shape it as a question." Matthias nodded once, attentive. Clara swallowed. "I want to study. Father Anselm has offered to help me with reading and writing, and I want to work for the endowment, not as a decoration, but as a protector of other girls." Matthias's gaze softened with something like pride that he did not try to hide. "Good," Clara continued, braver now. "And I want to keep my name." Matthias blinked. "Your name?" "Yes," Clara said. "Clara, the one I lived as, and also the one on the paper, because both are mine. I will not be renamed by someone else's convenience again." Matthias's throat moved. "Then you will keep it." Clara's eyes searched his. "Do not agree too quickly." Matthias gave a small, almost rueful exhale. "You are learning to doubt pretty words." Clara's lips pressed together. "Yes." Matthias nodded. "Then let me prove it with action. The endowment will be restructured. It will have oversight from Vienna, and you will have authority over its distribution." Clara's breath caught. "Authority?" "Yes," he said, "with proper counsel and support. Not as a burden, but as a right." Clara's voice trembled. "Why would you give me that?" Matthias answered, "Because it was meant for you, and because I trust you more than I trust any man who is hidden behind my seal." Clara looked away quickly, overwhelmed by the weight of being trusted. Matthias's voice lowered. "There is something else I want, Clara." Her pulse jumped. "Do not say it like that." Matthias paused, then softened his tone. "Forgive me. I forget that my words can feel like a door closing." Clara forced a shaky breath. "Say it plainly." Matthias held her gaze. "I want the right to court you." Clara froze. The word court sounded like a different life, a story in a book, not something that belonged to her, not after scrubbing floors. She swallowed. "You cannot court a maid." Matthias answered, "You are not a maid." Clara's cheeks heated. "I was." Matthias's voice turned gentle. "And you were mistreated as one. That is not the same as being only that." Clara's fingers curled against her palm. "If you court me, society will make me a spectacle." Matthias nodded. "Yes." Clara stared at him. "You say yes too easily." He met her gaze. "Because I will not insult you with comforting lies." Clara's throat tightened. "And your mother?" Matthias's eyes softened. "My mother cares less for gossip than people assume. She cares for decency. She has been lonely in a world that praises Polish more than goodness." Clara whispered, "And your aunt will despise me." Matthias's jaw tightened. "My aunt has made an art of despising anyone who does not kneel." Clara's voice shook. "So you would bring me into a battle?" Matthias stepped a fraction closer, still careful. "No, I would bring you into a choice. You may refuse me, and if you do, I will still ensure the endowment and your education move forward." "This will not be a bargain." Clara's eyes stung. "You must understand how difficult it is to believe that." Matthias nodded. "I do understand. Not from your side of the world, but from my failures. I am trying to become a man whose promises do not trap." Clara looked down, breath trembling. Matthias waited, giving her time. Clara whispered, "If you court me, it must be slow." Matthias said quietly, "Yes, and private," she added quickly. "Not paraded." "Yes," he repeated. "And you must accept that I may never feel comfortable in your halls," she said. Matthias's gaze stayed steady. "Then we will build comfort elsewhere too." Clara's voice dropped. You speak as if you are already planning a life. Matthias's throat moved. I am. Clara's breath caught. And you want me in it? Matthias did not look away. Yes. Silence fell again, and it was not the fearful silence of the servants' hall. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people realize words are too small. Clara finally whispered, I do not know how to be loved. Matthias's expression softened, and something in his eyes looked almost pained. Then we will learn together. Clara looked up sharply. Do not borrow my phrase. Matthias gave a small, genuine smile. Forgive me. I deserved that. Clara felt her mouth twitch, the beginning of a smile she did not yet fully trust. Matthias's voice grew more serious. Clara, may I show you something? He reached into his coat slowly, openly, making sure she did not startle. He took out a small folded paper and handed it to her. Clara held it carefully. What is it? Matthias said. A draft of the new endowment charter. Herr Weiss insisted we begin immediately. It lists your name as administrator, under council for the first year, with full authority thereafter. Clara's fingers trembled as she read the lines. She did not understand every legal phrase, but she understood the shape of it. The world making space for her. In writing. Her voice broke. This is real. Matthias nodded. It will be signed within the week. Clara looked up, blinking fast. Why are you doing so much? Matthias's gaze held hers. Because I cannot bear the idea of another Christmas Eve like yours happening under my roof. Clara swallowed. And because you... Matthias did not interrupt. He waited for her to choose her words. Clara's cheeks warmed. Because you care. Matthias's voice was quiet. Yes. Clara looked away again, overwhelmed. A few footsteps approached. Father Anselm, giving them space but not abandoning them, returned from speaking with a villager. He stopped at a respectful distance. Clara, your former mistress's messenger was seen in the village yesterday. People are talking. Clara's stomach tightened. Matthias's jaw set. Let them talk. Father Anselm's eyes moved between them. Talk can be cruel even without harsh words. Clara whispered, I know. Matthias looked at Father Anselm. Father, would you marry us? Clara's head snapped up. Us! Matthias turned toward her at once, reading her shock. Forgive me. I spoke too quickly. Clara's breath came fast. You said, marry. Matthias swallowed. I did. Clara's voice trembled. That is not courting. That is a leap. Matthias nodded slowly. You are right. He took a step back, giving her air. Then hear me properly. I want to marry you. Not today, not this hour, not to corner you. I want it as an end, not as a rescue. Clara's hands trembled around the paper. Why would you marry me? Matthias's voice lowered. Because when I looked into the servants' hall that night, I realized my house had been built on people being afraid to speak. And then I met you in the rectory, and you spoke one sentence that struck through every excuse I ever held. Clara whispered. Which sentence? Matthias's eyes stayed on hers. Your knowledge was never required. Clara's throat tightened. I did not mean to wound you. You did, he said gently. And you saved me with it. Clara's eyes filled. That sounds too grand. Matthias shook his head. It is simple. You made me see. Clara's voice broke. Seeing does not make you safe to love. Matthias nodded. No. Only consistency will. Clara pressed the paper to her chest, as if to steady herself. And you will be consistent. Matthias answered quietly. I intend to be. Clara's breath shook. I do not know if intention is enough. Matthias took a slow breath. Then let me offer you proof in a form you can refuse. He looked at Father Anselm. Father, forgive me again for speaking too quickly, but I will not hide what I want. Father Anselm's expression was calm, observant. Then say what you want, and leave room for her answer. Matthias nodded and turned fully to Clara. Clara, he said, and her name sounded different when he spoke it, as if it belonged in daylight. Will you allow me to court you with the purpose of marriage, under terms you set, with the freedom to end it, if you ever feel trapped? Clara stared at him, heart pounding. Matthias continued. And will you allow me, when the time comes, to take your hand publicly and say I chose you, not because of your crest, but because of your courage? Clara's lips parted. No sound came. Her instinct screamed to retreat, to be safe by being small. But another part of her, a quiet part that had survived the snow, lifted its head. She whispered, "You are asking for a great risk." Matthias nodded. "Yes." Clara's eyes stung. "And if I say yes, my whole life changes again." "Yes," he said softly. Clara's breath shook. "And if I say no, you will still sign that charter?" Matthias answered at once. "Yes." Clara held his gaze. "Say it again." Matthias did not hesitate. "If you say no, you will still have your education, your funds, your authority. You will still have every right. This is not the price." Clara's eyes filled, and this time she did not fight the tears. They slid down her cheeks without shame, because for once they did not feel like weakness. They felt like release. She raised her hand slightly, then stopped, uncertain. Matthias did not grab it. He simply waited, offering his stillness as permission rather than demand. Clara whispered, "I do not forgive you yet." Matthias nodded. "I know." Clara swallowed. "But I believe you are trying to become someone who deserves forgiveness." Matthias's throat tightened. "That is all I can hope for." Clara's voice trembled. "Then yes." Matthias went still. Clara repeated it a little stronger. "Yes, you may court me, slowly, and you must let me remain myself." Matthias exhaled as if something in him had been held too long. "Yes," Clara added quickly, almost fiercely. "And I will not be hidden, not as your charity, not as your secret." Matthias nodded. "You will not." Father Anselm watched them with quiet approval, then said gently, "Then let us pray for wisdom, because love without wisdom becomes pride." Clara gave a watery, shaky laugh. "I have never been accused of pride." Father Anselm's mouth softened. "Perhaps it is time you were." Matthias looked at Clara, his gaze warm and steady. "May I take your hand?" Clara hesitated, then held it out. Matthias took it carefully as if it were a vow. His gloved thumb rested lightly over her knuckles. The touch was gentle, but it sent a tremor through her, because it held no demand. Clara whispered, "Your hand is warm." Matthias's voice lowered. "So is yours." Clara swallowed. "No one has ever spoken to me like this." Matthias's eyes softened. "Then I will spend my life speaking to you properly." Weeks passed, and the world did what it always did. It talked. But the record talked louder. Herr Weiss's formal notices moved through proper channels. The Vienna accountant arrived at the estate with calm efficiency. Kruger's ledgers were examined. Funds were traced. Orders were issued for restitution. Kruger was removed from the estate entirely, not in spectacle but in quiet disgrace. Adelheid was forced to relinquish her command over servants, and without that power, her cruelty had nowhere to land. Clara did not celebrate their fall. She simply breathed easier. She began lessons with Father Anselm and a hired tutor, approved by Herr Weiss. She wrote her name until her hand stopped trembling. She read letters without stumbling. She learned to ask questions without apologizing. Matthias came often, not always with gifts but with time. He walked with her. He listened. He asked before entering a room. He spoke to her, as if her opinions mattered, even when no one else was watching. One afternoon, as she worked through a ledger of endowment distributions, Clara looked up suddenly. Matthias was seated across from her at the small inn table, reviewing correspondence. He looked up at once. "What is it?" Clara's cheeks warmed. "You are quiet." He blinked. "Am I?" "Yes," she said, surprised by her own softness. "You used to fill rooms with authority. Now you fill them with attention." Matthias's mouth tightened with something like humility. "Authority is easy. Attention is work." Clara nodded. "Yes." Matthias set his papers down. "Do you regret saying yes?" Clara's chest tightened. She shook her head. "No." Matthias's gaze held hers. "Do you trust me?" Clara hesitated, then spoke the truth. "More than I did. Less than you want." Matthias gave a small, sincere smile. "That is fair." Clara swallowed. "And I think I am beginning to care for you." Matthias did not move suddenly. He did not seize the confession. He simply let it exist. His voice was quiet. "Clara, you do not owe me that." "I know," she whispered. "That is why it frightens me." Matthias's gaze softened. "May I tell you something that frightens me?" Clara nodded once. Matthias said, I have never been loved for who I am, only for what I represent. And now I fear losing you not because of politics, but because you might look at me one day and realize I am still learning." Clara's eyes stung. "We are both learning." Matthias's voice lowered. "Then let us learn with our hands joined." Clara's breath shook. She reached for his hand across the table, not thinking, simply doing. Matthias's fingers closed gently around hers. He whispered, "Thank you." Clara's voice was soft. "Do not thank me. Just be here." "I am," he said. On a clear morning near the end of winter, Matthias brought Clara to the chapel again. This time there were fewer whispers. People had adjusted to the fact that reality did not ask permission. Inside, Father Anselm waited near the front, calm as ever. Clara's heart pounded. She was not dressed in extravagant finery. She was dressed neatly, properly, as herself. Her locket rested beneath her collar, no longer hidden in shame, but not displayed as bait. Matthias stood beside her. Clara's voice trembled. "We are truly doing this." Matthias looked at her. "Only if you still choose it." Clara swallowed. "I do." Matthias's eyes softened. "So do I." Father Anselm approached, hands folded, gaze kind. "Are you both here freely?" Clara answered first, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Yes." Matthias said, "Yes." Father Anselm nodded. "Then speak your vows plainly. Not to impress heaven. Heaven is not impressed by poetry, only by truth." Clara let out a shaky breath that almost became a laugh. "Father," he smiled slightly. "Go on." Matthias turned to Clara. His gaze held hers with a tenderness that did not demand anything back. "Clara," he said, voice low and clear, "I cannot erase what was done to you, but I can spend my life repairing what I allowed. I will listen when you speak. I will ask when I do not know. I will never use my rank to silence you. If I ever forget, you will remind me, and I will thank you for it." Clara's eyes filled. Matthias continued, "I will honor your name and your work. I will stand beside you, not in front of you. And if fear returns, I will not call you weak. I will call you brave for staying." Clara's breath shook. She held his gaze, and for the first time, she did not feel smaller than the moment. She spoke, voice trembling but clear. "Matthias, I cannot promise you easy love." His mouth softened. "I do not want easy love." Clara swallowed, then continued, "I promise you honest love. I will tell you when I am frightened. I will tell you when I am angry. I will not pretend, not even to keep peace, and I will not disappear from myself again." Matthias's eyes shone. Clara's voice softened. "I will let you know me. That is my vow." Father Anselm nodded, as if satisfied by the plain truth of it. He spoke the final blessing simply, without spectacle. The chapel was quiet, no grand music, no parade, only the sound of breath and the weight of a promise. When Father Anselm finished, Matthias did not immediately move. He looked at Clara as if he were waiting for permission even now. Clara whispered, cheeks warming, "You may kiss my hand." Matthias's breath caught, and he lowered his head, touching his lips to her knuckles with reverence so gentle it made her heart ache. Clara trembled, but she did not pull away. Outside the chapel, the village air felt sharper, brighter, as if winter itself had made room. A few villagers stood nearby, watching. Some looked curious. Some looked softened. One older woman made the sign of the cross and murmured, "God keep her." Clara heard it and blinked hard, not trusting that kindness could be directed at her so openly. Matthias leaned closer, voice low. "Are you all right?" Clara nodded, then whispered, "I am present." Matthias's mouth softened. "Good." Clara looked at him, suddenly bold. "Do not make me regret this." Matthias's eyes warmed. "I will spend every day making you glad you chose." Clara exhaled, then said the sentence she had once thought she would never say to anyone of his rank. "I chose," she whispered. Matthias's throat tightened. "Yes, you did." They walked together down the chapel steps, and for the first time, Clara did not feel like she was leaving one world for another. She felt like she was building a world of her own. At the estate, the servants' hall was quieter now in a different way. Not fearful, watchful perhaps, but no longer ruled by Adelheide's cold lessons. Frau Lisa met Clara at the entrance, her posture still strict, but her eyes different. "My lady," Frau Lisa said, then seemed to catch herself, uncertain. Clara's cheeks warmed. She shook her head gently. "Clara is enough." Frau Lisa nodded once, swallowing something like pride. "Clara, then." Clara looked at the woman who had once warned her not to speak because it would make it worse. She said softly, "It is better now." Frau Lisa's voice was quiet. "Yes, it is." Clara's gaze moved through the corridor where she had once been erased. She did not gloat. She did not punish. She simply walked as if her feet belonged there because her life belonged to her. Matthias stayed beside her, never pulling her forward, never letting her fall behind. Later, when they were alone, Clara sat at the desk in the small office set aside for the endowment records. The new ledgers were clean. The ink was fresh. The authority was real. She dipped the pen and wrote a heading, careful and steady. Matthias watched her from the doorway. Clara looked up. "What?" Matthias's voice was warm. "You look like someone who cannot be pushed into the snow anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "Do not speak of it." Matthias nodded. "Then I will speak of what came after." Clara exhaled. "What came after is still frightening." Matthias stepped closer. "Yes, but it is yours." Clara's eyes softened. "And you are mine." Matthias's breath caught. "Only if you want me to be." Clara stood and walked to him, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him without being swallowed by it. She placed her hand against his chest, not grasping, simply resting. "I want you," she said quietly, and the words were simple, honest and brave. Matthias's eyes shone. He lifted his hand and, with exquisite care, tucked a loose strand of hair back from her cheek. He whispered, "Then I am yours." Clara's breath shook, and she leaned her forehead lightly against his, not hiding, not shrinking. Outside, the world still held its rules and whispers and hierarchies. Inside, a woman who had been fired into the snow on Christmas Eve finally stood in the warmth of her own choosing, with a man beside her who had learned that love is not rescue, but respect, kept day after day. Thank you so much for listening to this story, all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.